What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto became a cold-hearted killer after Hinata's shocking betrayal? If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments. And also check the description to original creator of this beautiful creation. Naruto ran for his life down one of the many dark streets in the hopes of evading a handful of drunkards who pursued him. He was only a 7-year-old child and incapable of defending himself against the harshness of the world, so fleeing was his singular option. Not that he wasn't used to it by now. There seemed to be quite a few people amongst the villagers who actually attempted to act on their feelings of contempt and kill him, but such a thing got old after a while. The young blonde barreled through empty streets in the shadows of the moonlight to no avail. The hostile handful still followed. He dodged into random streets and alleys without looking back, his lungs burning from the effort and his muscles screaming for relief. Eternal minutes passed and the cries of the inebriated men died as the surrounding environment blurred into a darkened smear. The Uzumaki's small feet slowed when he felt he was finally safe, and he glanced up to find that, once again, he was not alone. Apparently he had entered a lesser populated section of Konoha, a select few blocks dedicated to shops and stores rather than living quarters. He stood before a circular dead end that was elevated in a clearing between clusters of tall buildings. The area was fairly spacious and there was an eerie fire that burned in the center amidst a circle of seals. The figures lining the outdoor chamber glared at him with a mixture of surprise and hate, both emotions he was familiar with by now. Every one of them carried brutal-looking long weapons and was donned in dark clothing that could cast a silhouette in the black of night. There was a single hooded man standing before the fascinating conflagration who turned to eye the newcomer as if expecting him. The blonde struggled to explain his way out of this one. "Hi. An intruder to our ritual," the menacing character stated coldly. He snapped a finger. "Kill him for the sacrifice." Naruto's eyes went wide at those words and he tried to run again, but this time he was caught by a bulky tall man with a mane of jet black hair that could overshadow a lion. The enemy stabbed at him with a long javelin, piercing his small stomach and sending the boy to the ground. The stranger then unearthed a string of beads connected to some circular jewelry and began chanting something while dragging a foot against the ground, smearing the Uzumaki's blood into a pattern. Said blonde felt the world growing dark and cold. His eyelids weighed more and more as the seconds passed and he struggled for breath. What felt like hours later, he awoke to find that very little had changed. The man who would be his murderer was still murmuring and painting that simple symbol on the ground in blood. The sight of the spilled crimson liquid suddenly seemed appealing, and Naruto felt anger well up in his gut, a special kind of rage that he had never experienced before. Heat emanated from his body and he felt strength return to his fragile body, so he clumsily stood to his feet and faced the man who stabbed him. The killer made haste and, for whatever reason, licked the end of the short spear and swallowed the smidgen of the boy's blood. Naruto didn't understand why he did this, but he no longer cared. He lunged at the man and clamped his small hands around the wide throat. What happened next would remain unclear to the boy for years to come. The fury within his soul surpassed the vengeance of being stabbed. It felt as if all the hatred and spite of the world was being channeled through his veins. His soul burned with malicious power, and every act of cruelty and harshness ever bestowed on the Uzumaki exited his body through the muscles and tendons of his arms as he proceeded to tear his assailant apart with every ounce of strength available to him. A voice not his own screeched in his mind as he beat, ripped, tore, and bludgeoned the dying enemy. Said man fought back, his mouth opening and his weapon slashing, but no sound came from him or the outside world. What seemed to be days passed before the blonde child's sentience returned from the inner hell on earth, and he awoke to his consciousness to find himself drenched in blood. The other frightening individuals flinched to move against him but checked the motion when the hooded man held up an open palm. "Halt," he ordered quietly, his command followed obediently. "He has proven himself." Naruto straightened himself from the bloodbath at his feet and stared coldly at the awaiting throng. This time, rather than glares of hatred, everyone's gaze contained something foreign, begrudging approval. The boy didn't understand how or why these intimidating people seemed to suddenly tolerate him, but that was amusing far from his mind. He was in shock. He had just killed a man with his bare hands and reality seemed to be an eternal distance away as he stared into the moonlit night with azure orbs. He regarded the hooded man with blank eyes. According to our beliefs, the man waved a hand and the mutilated corpse was handled by an adjacent pair of strangers. You keep what you kill. The bloody heap was brought to him and he carefully removed the golden jewelry from the shredded neck. You have killed Vastos, not a simple task among the believers. He was a powerful one amongst the followers gathered here. He held the ornament out towards the boy, the simple symbol dangling from the beaded wire. If you wish, you may take his place amongst us. The blonde continued his empty gaze. Why would I do that? He inquired with a choked voice. He wanted to cry but his body refused to cooperate. In our way of life, one can do whatever they please. There is but one requirement, that we slaughter our enemies in the name of our Lord. The young Uzumaki's impressionable mind took all this in and began mulling it over. At first he blatantly rejected it, but memories of the countless efforts on his life kept him from verbally expressing so. The gears in his brain turned. For as long as he could remember, people had been trying to kill him. He had been consistently abandoned by those supposedly responsible for his care and well-being, and he was continuously ignored and berated by those who wouldn't actively seek to end his life without cause. What was there to truly live for? It was obvious that no one cared about him save the elderly Hokage, and even he wouldn't be around for long. Soon enough, he would be absolutely alone in a world that denied him his right to simple survival. There was no point in going against such a futile uphill battle while being held back by the hatred and disgust of the world. He weakly held out his hand to accept the bloodied medallion. Is there more? The hooded man smiled wide and graciously relinquished the golden ornament. So much more, he stated while Vastos's body was hurled into the bizarre fire onto a pike hidden by the flames. The corpse was thoroughly impaled and began burning with a certain fascinating grotesqueness. Let us now begin the ritual, and you shall be one of us, he explained before turning in place and raising his hands into the air. We beseech you to hear us, Lord Jashin. That night, Naruto watched and listened intently to the disturbing ceremony and became the newest member in the cult to the god of murder. He had chosen to change his fate to that of immortal hatred and vengeance in exchange for the inherent kindness in his heart. Naruto, Iruka called from his roster, you're next. The boy silently rose from his seat and calmly made his way to the room in which he would be tested for graduation from the ninja academy. Iruka and Mizuki observed the quiet, intimidating boy approach the desk and put his hands together into the appropriate seals. While Mizuki displayed his false concern for the boy, Iruka felt something entirely different. The scarred shinobi had known Naruto when the boy was a mere child they had encountered on another several times in the streets. At the time, the Amino understood that the blonde child craved attention and worked to obtain it any way possible, whether in the form of pranks or simply childish behavior. He understood that the boy had led a harsh life and empathized with him when they first met, but now something happened to Naruto before his entrance into the academy. As the years went by, so did his wardrobe. His gaudy jumpsuits transformed into impossibly dark, loose-fitting robes that weren't even appropriate at a funeral. The boy before him wore one such robe tied together by a coil of rope that was dyed blood red and carried a scent frighteningly similar to that of the ruby liquid. He was also the only student to ever carry an unsheathed weapon, an odd spear that was almost as tall as he was. The javelin gradually flattened into a thick blade at one end while the other tapered off into a spike. It was beyond Iruka how one was meant to wield it effectively. But looks were only the tip of the iceberg. His personality had also undergone a radical change. The happy-go-lucky personality that had once defined the Uzumaki had all but vanished by now. He still smiled and spoke loudly with pride, but the smiles were those of a beast seeking to kill, and the headstrong attitude possessed undertones of one who did not fear death or retribution in any way. The way he carried himself had changed, too. Gone was the cheerful bounce in his step and morose slump when he was down. Those were now replaced by a confident slouch that was a mix of laxness and superiority. Even Sasuke's brooding self couldn't touch that combination. Which led to another thing: Naruto's interactions with the other students. He no longer strived to be the center of attention. Instead, he sat back to live and let live, at least until someone threw a verbal jab his way. Such actions died rather quickly, since the other preteens seemed to sense something wrong emanating from the boy. They generally kept their distance. Strangely enough, when the blonde first began exhibiting his aloof attitude, a small fan club developed for him. It seemed the females of the class were attracted to the bad boy stereotype. But unlike Sasuke, who chose merely to brood while keeping everyone at arm's length, Naruto frightened the fledgling fangirls with the specifics of his daily habits. It was later said that his gaze could stop one's heart for a moment, and not in the romantic sense. The Amino was also curious about the boy's academic standing. To be sure, the Uzumaki wasn't the best and brightest of the class, but he had never really displayed any true show of intelligence. He would easily score among the lowest on tests where book smarts were concerned, and his chakra control, for lack of a better word, sucked. But when it came to practical applications of chakra, he would try hard enough to get the job done at an absolutely minimum level then quit, so his capabilities were still unknown. Iruka also wondered why the boy displayed such a detailed understanding of muscle groups and bone structures only to turn around and fail to name a few key facts that were practically common knowledge. Hell, he mused, he's even corrected me a few times on human anatomy. The scarred Chunin was shaken from his inner observations when the blonde in question failed to produce an adequate clone. "Sorry, Naruto," he began, "I can't pass you for that. It's a shitty way to test battlefield skills," the Uzumaki sneered. "What good are clones you can't even touch anyway? Like it or not, those are the basics. If you can't even pull those off, then I can't pass you." "Don't be so harsh, Iruka," Mizuki countered, "after all, this is his third time testing for graduation. Perhaps we could let him pass this time, he's obviously putting forth the effort." He wondered about that last comment. "Mizuki, you know the rules. We can't make exceptions for anyone." Naruto snorted with eyes that possessed elevated degrees of annoyance. The preteen turned on his heel to exit the room. "I'll try again next time," he spat before disappearing from view. The Amino sighed inwardly. The boy was difficult to understand. Or maybe it was simpler than things appeared. Little did he know he would find out soon enough. Late that night, Iruka sailed through the trees in search of the blonde. The boy had made off with one of the forbidden scrolls from the Hokage's home, and the village was on high alert. The scarred man hoped he found his pupil before anyone else. Who knew what the others would do to him? He sighed in relief when he found the blonde seated next to the document in question and taking controlled heavy breaths. The older ninja approached the prone boy and confronted him in a way he didn't see as too aggressive. "Naruto, what the hell were you thinking?" The blonde gazed at him with mildly sleepy eyes. "Iruka," he greeted with his usual bloody smile, "can I pass now?" "What do you mean, can I pass now? You stole a very dangerous scroll. What the hell were you thinking?" Mizuki said, "If I snuck the scroll past the Hokage and learned something from it," he panted yet hid his exhaustion, "I could pass." The Amino raised an eyebrow. "He what?" he asked with real concern overriding his frustration. "He told you to. He put two and two together." "Oh my god? Well," a voice called from the treetops, "looks like you got to him before me." Both heads swiveled to find Mizuki perched on a thick limb overhead. "Mizuki," Iruka yelled, "why did you tell Naruto to steal the scroll? And they call you a teacher," he mused outwardly, "you can't even figure that one out? It's a treasonable offense. You know that. Oh come on, no one'll ever link me to it. I mean, look," he nodded towards the blonde, "everyone knows he stole it, and when neither he nor the scroll returns, everyone'll know he took off with it." His eyes widened. What are you planning? Why are you doing this? You seriously don't know? Fucking moron." He stood from his crouched position. "Might as well tell you since you won't be around much longer." "Yes, explain yourself." The Amino unsheathed a kunai. "You know as well as I do what that brat is." Mizuki, Iruka knew full well what the traitor was about to say, and his voice dripped with warning, "Don't say it. He's the nine-tailed fox. When I kill you too, I'll dispose of the bodies and no one will know or care that he's gone. Hell," he continued, "if it wasn't for me talking off, I'd probably be a hero in this village." The scarred Chunin glanced back at Naruto. He expected the boy to be in shock from the news, but what he found instead surprised him. The Uzumaki merely grimaced with what appeared to be a smile tugging at his lips. "I get it now," the boy whispered to himself, "it all makes sense." "Naruto." The ninja instructor crouched and grasped the blonde by the shoulders, "You are not the fox." "Mizuki is lying," said traitor laughed. "Come on, Iruka, don't lie. He killed your parents that night when he attacked. You should be thanking me." "That's a lie," Iruka shouted back at the man in the trees. "Naruto is the fox's prison, not the fox himself." Whatever, Mizuki gave up the verbal spar and unhooked one of his oversized shuriken. Once I take you out, I'll be free to make any kind of bargain I want. He lobbed the massive throwing star, but not at Iruka. The failed academy student was far more vulnerable. The scarred man saw this ploy and moved to intercept the incoming weapon while shielding his frightening student. He leaned over the blonde in time to receive a sharp pain spinning into his back, spattering blood in the boy's face. He glanced down to order the boy to run only to find his expectations dashed once again. "What are you doing?" Naruto inquired with a fading grin that resembled disappointment. He didn't seem shocked at all that his teacher was injured or that there was blood on his face. "Why did you do that?" "Wah." He almost questioned him further but swallowed the question with some blood. "Naruto, you've got to run." He gathered himself, yanked the weapon from his back, and returned it to the sender. Mizuki easily dodged the hastily flung device. Not good enough. He leapt from his hefty branch and tossed the other one, landing it squarely in the fellow Chunin's stomach. Iruka doubled over from the sudden pain while the traitor rushed towards the boy who attempted to stand in time to counter him. Fortunately, he was far more experienced than the blonde Bane, and his kunai stuck quite nicely in the boy's abdomen. But the Uzumaki did not go down. His face scrunched up in pain, but he suddenly jabbed at Mizuki with that strange spear he always carried. Mizuki hadn't expected the failed novice ninja to be so composed, so the blade of the javelin nicked him ever so slightly as he leapt back. He stared in awe as the boy, sporting a sick smirk that belonged on a serial killer rather than a 12-year-old, began moving his foot in wide arcs, smudging the spilled blood into a familiar pattern. Wait a second, the traitor recognized the bloody symbol. After all, he was a teacher. "That's Yura. This will not be pleasant," Naruto stated with a dark smirk before licking the edge of the weapon that penetrated the backstabber's flesh. His body instantly transformed into that of a living voodoo doll since he already stood in the accursed mark, and he plunged his unique weapon into the open wound of his stomach. "Gah!" Mizuki gurgled in agony as his knees hit the ground and his abdomen split open. Blood dribbled from his lips and his eyes displayed the true fear of death as a recovering Amino watched the entire spectacle in horror. The blonde immortal spared a brief glance at the scarred ninja before returning his gaze upon the traitor's face. He loved it when his victims screamed and begged for their lives, even if such pleas could only be described by their facial expressions. "That's good," he said, trembling a bit from the ensuing endorphin release. "That's real good." He jabbed a kidney and chuckled at the painful yet tingly sensation. He continued to inflict harm upon himself and, thus, his enemy until he tired of it. When it got old, he smiled at the doomed man who lied in a pool of blood. "See you in hell, Mizuki." The spear impaled Naruto's heart and ended Mizuki's tortuous ordeal. The Uzumaki then spent the next few minutes preparing for the after-kill ritual. There were many such ceremonies that had to be obeyed in order to receive the benefits of immortality. But before he could lie in the center of the bloody circle, Iruka summoned the strength to speak. "Naruto?" He turned to face the man. "Yes? So you're a follower of Jashin?" "Yes," he nodded. As the wounded Chunin took in this newfound information, he realized that everything made sense now. Naruto's sudden change of personality, the way he carried himself, his method of confrontation and interaction, it all finally matched up. "Naruto," he spoke, one question nagging him above all others. "What?" The blonde put a pause to his preparations once again. "Did you?" He swallowed. "Did you join willingly?" The immortal boy regarded him with darkened azure eyes. Was even the ambivalent Iruka about to betray him as well? "Yes." "You did?" "I did." The wounded man closed his eyes and gave the smallest of smiles. He sighed reluctantly, that's good, that's good." Those blue eyes narrowed. His teacher approved? "How's that good? You joined of your own free will. That was your choice, not someone else's. You weren't fooled into doing something you didn't want." An awkward moment passed and Naruto nodded before finally lying down on his bloody seal and jabbing his weapon into his chest. Many minutes quietly passed and, before he knew it, the minor ceremony was complete. As he stood, the scarred ninja spoke again. "Naruto." He gazed at the wounded instructor. "I know this was your choice, and I won't tell you whether or not it was the right one, but please remember this." The blonde recognized some form of lecture ensuing and turned to leave. "I know you had a harsh life and I'm no one to criticize you for your own choices, but if you've ever listened to me, Please listen to this." The immortal stopped and aimed a passively attentive face in his direction. "If you ever find someone who tolerates you, someone who cares for you, someone who loves you," he winced from his deep injuries, "don't just let them go. Treasure them." The disturbing boy took note of this advice and nodded. "I'll keep it in mind." "That's good," he smiled, a trail of blood trickling from his lips. "Oh, yeah? Did you learn anything from that scroll?" he inquired wearily to lighten the mood while awaiting a medical team. This earned a smug smile from the immortal. "You bet I did?" Sarutobi sat in his office staring intently into his crystal ball, viewing the scene that took place between teacher and student. While Naruto proceeded to create a mere handful of clones, the aged shinobi's mind raged in inward battle. "I should have known," he thought. "Naruto went missing that night when those Jashin believers came through. Damn it, I should have been more attentive." He leaned back in his chair and the logical portion of his brain kicked in. But what could I do? If I had refused that cult passage, they would have fought their way through. It would have been a bloodbath for both sides, all for the sake of a route for a simple pilgrimage. He recalled that day clearly. The high priest, a deeply scarred old man shrouded in an ornate crimson and obsidian hood, agreed to Konoha's terms so the group could pass through the village in safety. They may have been immortal, but it was still possible to permanently incapacitate them. He returned to his magical surveillance device and grimaced. It was understandable why the Uzumaki would have been attracted to the religion of murder. He was a highly impressionable child at the time, and the cult guaranteed something that was always in jeopardy as well as a means to extract vengeance. The Jashin doctrine assured him life everlasting and the bottomless hatred to kill all those who wronged him. The next day earned the Uzumaki even more glares, but not because he was a killer who enjoyed his beliefs. He hadn't passed the public exam to become a genin, but here he sat regardless. "Why are you here?" the nearby Sasuke inquired with a voice filled with spite. "Curse the fact that the nearest seat was next to him. You failed." Naruto directed his murderous gaze and sadistic smile at the Uchiha. "I passed another way." The brooding genius scoffed. "I doubt it." "Proof," he replied simply, raising his plaited headband that was loosely tied around his neck and rested under his dark robes. "I passed." Sasuke made some offhanded comment about allowing a loser like the immortal blonde to pass and sparked a verbal death match between the two while a certain Hyuga watched from above. Hinata couldn't believe that Naruto had somehow passed. What alternate test could he have taken? But such a point was moot for her. The blonde was once again in her proximity. Over the years, she had grown fond of the boy despite his frightening personality. At first she was attracted to his carefree personality, but when he started to change she took it as a sign of maturity. But while that was true to some extent, she hadn't been entirely correct, and she knew something had happened to him to alter his life in a significant way. At first she was scared of him. She clearly recalled the day he arrived in the dark robes and strange spear and how afraid she felt. But unlike the budding fans who abandoned the blonde, she attempted to understand him a little more, and it paid off. She learned that underneath the intimidating exterior lied the same headstrong confidence from which she took inspiration. He still carried himself in that way that defied all those who told him he was worthless, something she desperately wished she could do as well. All in all, the qualities that she had grown to appreciate were still there, only the wrapping was different. She wondered if she could ever work up the courage to talk to him. Perhaps today would be the day? Hours later, Team 7 sat on a rooftop exchanging introductions. Sasuke didn't reveal much, only that he had a superiority complex, a one-track mind, and childish motives. Sakura didn't verbally unveil much, but her body language and girlish mannerisms spoke volumes. She was pretty much a disappointment as well. Naruto's response was far more colorful. He stated his name and instantly followed it up with, "I like ramen and death. I hate people in general, and I wish to one day become a high priest." The Haruno shied away from his voice and maniacal facial expression while the Uchiha merely raised an eyebrow. Kakashi glared blankly at the boy. He had heard about the incident regarding Mizuki's gruesome death and Naruto's involvement. High priest, huh? He wondered, he's a bigger time bomb than Sasuke? When the newly minted team broke for the day, the blonde immortal walked casually down one of the many market streets, ignoring the glares shot his way. He didn't care about these insignificant people, and they knew he could easily kill anyone who wished to make an attempt on his life. Stories of his assailants turning up dead without any apparent weapon wounds only served to widen the unspoken barrier around him. He continued down the road until a commotion halted his progress. "Goddamn bitch," an obviously drunk individual shouted at a woman dressed in a trench coat. He tossed an empty bottle at her and continued, "Fucking snake whore, I'm not looking for trouble." Anko shot back, "You shoulda died when that traitor fucked you over." He tossed a rock at her next. She dodged the stone easily. "I said I'm not looking for a fight. Just let me eat in peace and I'll be outta here." "Bullshit." He unearthed a serious blade from beneath his clothes. "You were probably planning to kill my son with him, huh?" He almost stumbled over the passing blonde. "Who the fuck are you?" "Move," he stated, "you're in my way." "My ass, kid." The inebriated man obviously didn't recognize the boy. Kids oughta know their place. He slashed at him with the blade, etching a superficial wound into the blonde's cheek. "Now get. I'm gonna skin me a snake, ah." He yelped loudly when a spike impaled his foot. "All you had to do was move," Naruto stated with a growing smile. "Better start praying." He extracted the weapon and moved his hand towards the small gourd he kept tied to his crimson rope belt as the man scampered away, whimpering in pain the entire way. "Hey, stop." A hand halted the boy's moving arm to prevent him from grasping the container. "You don't need to go that far." He eyed the Mitarashi with a glare and a confused sneer that compelled her to keep her distance. As if feeling the unconscious command, she released him and backed away a few feet. "Why?" he asked. "He attacked me." "I know, but that doesn't mean you should kill him," she replied with mild apprehension. He cocked an eyebrow. "Why?" "Well, that's just something you don't do. I mean, he should be punished by having a brick shoved up his ass, but he's drunk, he doesn't really know what he's doing. He was going to attack you after killing me," he explained matter-of-factly. "Would you have let him go or killed him?" "I would've incapacitated his ass and handed him over to the Anbu." He tilted his head and frowned. "Why?" She paused before answering. "Sometimes, people just discriminate against people like me. I can't really do anything about it if I want to, you know." The blonde realized that she meant she was ostracized like him, but her answer still confused him. Why not kill anyone who meant harm, especially those who judged others with extreme prejudice? That didn't make sense to him. "I don't get it. When I stood up to the people who abused me, they stopped. Why won't you?" Anko swallowed and briefly wondered if he knew why he was an outcast. "I don't do it because I actually want a chance to redeem myself." "Why do you need to redeem yourself?" She paused at the unpleasant memories. "I used to be Orochimaru's apprentice." Naruto raised an eyebrow at the familiar name. One of his religion's believers had joined an organization that possessed a member by that name. And, she smiled weakly, a lot of people can't really differentiate between master and apprentice, so I've got a lot to prove in order to fit in, and even then it's not a guarantee. The blonde gazed at her a moment longer, then returned his elongated weapon to its holster. "I see," he said before turning to leave. The Mitarashi stared after the boy before re-entering the shop to complete her now cold meal. "So that's Naruto Uzumaki," she mused, "poor kid. And I thought I had it bad." She retook her abandoned seat and frowned. She could relate to the boy in such a close way. It was a naive way of thinking, but was there a possibility they could be friends? "Nah," she shook her head, "we both got our own shit to deal with." Still, she directed her gaze out a nearby window. It would be nice to know someone who has a similar pain. Naruto entered his home and slumped down onto the ragged couch he pulled from a dumpster several years ago. The blonde had eaten a feast of ramen at Ichiraku's stand, and the recent memory still plagued him. He liked that establishment. A sick grin always plastered his face whenever he thought of the old chef's daughter, Ayame. She was so cute with that look of mild fear every time she glanced his way. He often wondered how her voice would waver and her lips would quiver should he take her to the brink of death before pushing her over the edge, but the only reason he refrained from doing so was because her father would probably close the shop upon her passing, or at the very least stop serving him. It was a conflict of interest, ramen versus indiscriminate killing. In the end, ramen won because Ichiraku's was the best in Konoha. Besides, its owners were among the select few people who tolerated him. Before his conversion he owed them that much. He unhooked the latch that kept his weapon to his side and noticed the blood from the man he wounded earlier hadn't yet dried. Staring at it, His lips creased into a smile and he strolled over to a special mat on his floor. Taking his small gourd and popping the cork, he poured a small puddle of blood onto the heavily stained fabric and smeared it into the familiar pattern. He licked the crimson fluid from the spiked end of his javelin and promptly plunged the device through his chest, trembling at the ecstasy of pain. Somewhere within the Konoha hospital, a man being treated for a foot injury lurched forward as his chest miraculously split open in a fountain of blood. He died before he knew what happened. A half-hour later, as the Uzumaki finished up his after-killing ritual, he proceeded to unravel the scroll containing the teachings of Jashin. He had read the script many times over by now and it was fairly short and straightforward, but he always reveled in reading the few rules that Lord Jashin bestowed upon his fellow immortals. His mind was muddled with the conversation with the snake woman. He needed to squash the doubts that arose in his conscience thanks to her. Why do her words bother me so much? Kill without discrimination, he chanted quietly. All men are mortals and deserve no separate treatment. Kill in the name of Jashin, he continued, for he is the being who will one day baptize the land in blood gathered from those who follow him. Life is not precious, there is much of it. Live every moment as it is your final hour. Be strong and unyielding, soft words will only stay our Lord's coming. He reached the final and most important command of them all. Abolish all forms of weakness and embrace chaos. Affection clouds the mind and stays the killing blow. Take up hatred and abandon love. The blonde continued to mutter aloud the entire script to cast Anko's words from his mind to no avail. He was so wrapped up in destroying the remaining sensitive emotions he had left that he didn't notice the faint presence at the door. Hinata ran home with tears scrubbing her eyes. She had forced herself to go to Naruto's door and talk to him to tell her how she felt. After a solid 5 minutes of building the courage to knock on the door, she activated her Byakugan for only a moment to be sure she wasn't intruding, despite the irony of that thought process. What she saw shocked her beyond comprehension. The blonde stabbed himself through the heart with his ebony spear. She was so surprised that she couldn't even scream, but before she could compose herself and burst into the room to help him, he removed the weapon as if went through air before impaling himself against the floor for a half-hour. The only reason the Hyuga didn't enter the rundown abode at all was because she couldn't move. Fear and irrationality possessed full reign over her mind. Eventually, the boy sat up like nothing happened and began reading out of a scroll. This was when she bolted for home, confusion and concern littering her thoughts. What was that? She wondered with intense worry. What did Naruto do to himself? How is he alive? Her legs began to slow and her salty tears finally had a chance to flow downwards properly. What is Naruto? Kakashi was direly worried about his students, one in particular. He had heard of Mizuki's death at Naruto's hands and was duly informed of the boy's religious affiliation, and, while he didn't know how the boy ended the traitor's life, it concerned him to no end. He doesn't worry about consequences like everyone else, he knew. The question is, will he listen to anyone? The survival test he administered to the newly instated genin came close to being a disaster. As predicted, Sasuke attempted to acquire a bell on his own and Sakura did little more than fawn over the Uchiha. But the Uzumaki's tactics were expectantly suicidal. The blonde immortal attacked him head on the moment he said, "Go," and while the Hitaki was more than capable of defending himself, he had little doubt in his mind that Naruto would honestly kill him if given the opportunity. At one point, he actually had to reveal his Sharingan in order to avoid bodily injury. He didn't know how the fanatical cult performed their ritualistic killings, but he would be damned if that modified javelin was poisoned. Thankfully, Sasuke wasn't nearby to notice the transplanted bloodline and give the experienced ninja hell about it. When the noonday sun approached the sky, Sakura was tied to the stump. She was the only novice that hadn't made an attempt at capturing a bell. Kakashi berated the trio for not understanding and utilizing the point of the test teamwork, to which the blonde killer snarled, "Why would I work with these two? I can take care of you without their help." The Hitaki had to admire the boy for his choice of words. Naturally, the other two took offense to this statement, having assumed it to be an insult directed at their skill. But the Jonin knew better. A follower of Jashin was invulnerable. There was no incentive to work with a team. No one had ever heard of a member of the infamous cult that fought alongside others. In the end, Kakashi had to pass them. He was much harsher on the students after the break, but they managed to capture the bells and divvy them appropriately on his terms. Ironically, it was the blonde who forced the other two into operating as a team, albeit unconventionally. Whenever Sasuke prepared for an attack, Naruto would follow up in ways no one else could due to his immortality and, at points, literally throw Sakura into the fray. He didn't seem to care for her well-being in the least and used her as no more than bait more often than not. As the newfound team limped home in their respective directions, the Hitaki caught up to the immortal boy. He wanted to talk, and the Uzumaki would hear him out or die trying, figuratively, anyway. Naruto, he addressed the preteen. The boy's azure orbs rolled with his head and he glared at his teacher with lazy eyes. What? I want to talk to you about, you know? An awkward moment passed. My beliefs? Yes, he affirmed, I understand that you are immortal, but your teammates aren't. I need to know that you'll watch their backs when push comes to shove. The boy's lips parted in that patented disturbing smile. Of course, Kakashi. I'll watch their backs. Something didn't sound right about how he said that. Will you back them up as a proper team member? I need to know. The grin disappeared. I don't like them, he stated with a growing measure of spite in his tone. I'll stick with them to accomplish my goals. Nothing more. With that, he strolled off without uttering another word. Kakashi shivered internally. Sasuke's murderous intentions were nothing compared to this boy. How could such a young child be so filled with hatred and anger? Perhaps it was a trademark of all those who served Jashin. Naruto walked down the busy street unhindered. A few folks who witnessed his attack on the drunkard's foot the previous day shied away. News of the man's death had already permeated the masses and, while there was no real proof, everyone knew that the two events were related. The reason most of the village was ignorant of the random violence surrounding the blonde was twofold. First, they were unaware of his murderous beliefs. To be sure, they were certain he was a cold-hearted killer, but that trait was attributed to the fox. Secondly, there were only two people in the entire village who knew of Jashin's followers' special method of murder. Iruka, who had recently witnessed it firsthand, and the elderly Hokage, who had been alive long enough to see it once. Yo, kiddo! A familiar feminine voice sounded off from behind him before an arm draped itself across the boy's shoulder. The Uzumaki instinctually positioned his javelin to jab whoever was behind him, but he recognized the individual in time to check the motion. Still, that didn't stop him from glaring at the woman. You again, he addressed a smirking Anko, what do you want? Oh wow, she snickered, you really are scary. His brilliant eyes narrowed. Go away, he ordered, or I'll kill you. Christ, you're uptight. She released him and stood upright by his side within the 5-meter radius everyone gave him. Why so serious? What do you want? He wanted to know why this woman was bothering him before he sent her away or ended her life. Either option appealed to his bloody senses. Come on, she patted him on the shoulder, I just want to hang out. Ouch. Naruto held his javelin steady, the flattened bladed edge having grazed the outer edge of the Mitarashi's upper arm. He intended to make do on his threat, but before he could retract his weapon to extract the warm crimson fluid, the woman began to massage the minor wound with a smile not unlike his own. That hurt, she complained insincerely, I guess I'm not gonna crack your shell that quickly, She thought something was odd with the boy before realizing that he was staring at the mild cut with the corners of his lips curved upwards. An idea struck her and she moved the affected limb across her body and licked the wound. Besides, that was a method to stave off infection. Who knew how many people experienced the end of that weapon? As the woman's tongue gently caressed the small injury, the immortal's face exploded into a smile. Whoever this woman was, he liked her. There were so few sadists in Konoha, perhaps this was another person who enjoyed pain as much as he did? This revelation was not lost on Anko. Guess all that time hanging around Orochimaru taught me something useful after all. She began bandaging the minuscule wound, all the while lost in her thoughts. She had done a lot of thinking the day before and concluded that, despite her best efforts, she was still fairly ostracized by the villagers. Sure, she held her own among her fellow ninjas, but they merely appreciated her skills. Even then she had few people she could call friends and even fewer she could refer to as confidants. Then out of the blue, she encountered this blonde kid who understood what it was like to be an outcast. Truth be told, he was worse off since he had yet to display any show of skill or power to distinguish himself amongst his peers. It was like looking into a mirror. She could see her own childhood in the days Orochimaru abandoned her and the village generally shunned her because of her treacherous master's betrayal despite her loyalty. The Mitarashi decided after much deliberation that she would at least attempt to understand this disturbed boy and possibly even gain his trust. She knew that he probably needed her friendship as much as she needed his. She was broken from her inner musings when the blonde suddenly licked his blade clean, then wrapped the weapon in its holding strap. "Hey," she tried to change the subject, "you want to get something to eat?" "Might treat." The boy's devilish grin never wavered as he considered. He then turned on his heel and began walking with purpose. Anko took his bemused silence as an affirmative and followed closely behind while ignoring the glares shot their way and the whispers emanating behind their backs. "No big deal," she forced a smile. "Most of these assholes wouldn't accept me anyway." The duo continued without a word until they came upon a small ramen stand. Upon arrival, Naruto instantly planted his butt on a seat and glanced at the snake woman, his disturbing grin still alive and well. "Your treat," he affirmed, "right?" "You bet," she assured while taking the stool next to him. Out of the corner of her eye she noticed the two other patrons hasten their meal before leaving. "Hey Naruto," the old man behind the counter greeted nonchalantly, "what'll it be?" "The usual." "Got it. Same for you, miss?" He received an affirming nod and began his work. Over the years, old man Ichiraku noted the changes in the preteen. One day many moons ago, the boy's cheery personality no longer seemed so bright, and the ensuing days only brought about its eventual death. Now, the only smiles the blonde ever gave reeked of twisted sadism, and he didn't appreciate the smirks and eye contact the boy gave his daughter. But Naruto had never done anything to warrant suspicion, so he continued to serve him according to his personal policy of indiscrimination. "So Naruto," the snake woman began before being interrupted. "What's your name?" He gazed at her with a twisted fascination. "You know mine, so what's yours?" "Anko," she held out an open palm, "Anko Mitarashi." He accepted the gesture but held on too long. In combination with his smiling features, it made for a creepy scene. "Why are you treating me?" "Already told you," she replied, "I just want to hang out." His mood instantly died as he frowned. "Why? No one wants to hang out with me. Ever." She smirked his way then peered forward. "Dunno. Just felt like it." She hoped to at least gain some small measure of trust today. The blonde's eyes narrowed and he shrugged to concede defeat. What did he care? After all, she was paying for a meal. The steaming hot bowls arrived soon enough and he accepted the food from an Ayame that trembled ever so slightly under his disturbing gaze. "Thank you, Ayame," he grinned, taking extreme satisfaction in the older teen's nervousness. The Mitarashi took note of this. "Ya no," she stuffed a mouthful of noodles from her bowl into her gullet then swallowed. "You might not want to freak out the people who serve you food." "Why?" he asked without skipping a beat in his feeding. "They can put stuff in your food that's not so good." "Like what?" He shoveled in another batch. "Well, how do you know that broth's only water? Maybe one of them took a leak in it." He chuckled, spilling noodles through his teeth. "Nah, these guys wouldn't do that, would you, Ayame?" He addressed the apprehensive girl behind the counter. "No," she replied, Don't be silly." "But now that you mention it," he continued while examining a coil of noodles at the end of his chopsticks, "this tastes really spicy. It's making my mouth numb." "What's in this?" The girl visibly jumped at the inquiry. "It's a new recipe." "Yeah." She glanced back and forth between the sole customers and the door to the back room. Gotta go check the rest of the pot." She sprinted away. My god, Anko thought, he scares the shit out of her. "It's not working," Ayame hissed at a man dwelling within the back room. "You said the effects would be immediate." "Huh," the man scratched his head, "I don't get it." He held a blank vial brimming with a white powder before his face. "This stuff is concentrated. It should have been able to take him out like that." He snapped his fingers. The teen glanced nervously at the door. "He tastes it too," she stated. "He says it's spicy and is making his mouth numb." The man shrugged. "I don't know what to tell you. Those are possible effects of the poison. He's just not dying." "Why is that?" His gaze went to the side. He believed it to be the fox, but he was under oath not to disclose that to the younger girl. "Why won't this kill him?" Naruto's voice boomed from the storefront. "Hey Ayame." Seconds. This caught her off guard. She stammered, "See coming." The visitor shook his head then made for the back door. "Sorry, Ayame." I appreciate you trying to help me out. Not a problem, she smiled weakly, Mr. Haruno. I'll be heading out now, he announced before exiting. My daughter will not be associated with that monster, I swear it. Little did either know that a blonde clone of the immortal hidden above the rafters was eavesdropping on the entire conversation. When Sakura's father left, it popped from existence and relayed the information back to the original. Hey Ayame, the blonde killer grinned at the emerging girl, please don't make it spicy this time. He winked to convey his point. Anko wondered what he meant and was only further confused when the teenage girl gasped and dropped the bowl in her hands. Well, Naruto, the Mitarashi stated happily, guess I'll see you around. Naruto returned the gesture with a nod and a grim smile. Back at Ya, his perpetual grin gave the term an underlying slyness. Anko strolled away from the blonde filled with confidence. She was certain that she established a link with the boy today and that, in due time, he could begin to trust her enough to call her a friend. She was proud of that accomplishment and was profoundly overjoyed to have gained someone she could one day truly call a comrade, but she also felt that there was an overwhelming presence about the preteen. Almost like he's trying his hardest to be something he's not. While the snake mistress mused over her newfound confidant, said Immortal trudged through the back streets in search of the Haruno household. His clone had been extremely handy, although he didn't quite grasp the particulars of how that technique functioned. Regardless, he felt obligated to visit the man who attempted to poison him. Naruto. A stuttering voice that sounded familiar called after him. Gah, he growled in frustration. What? He whipped around. Was today, bother Naruto, day? Hinata yelped when he spun on his heel to glare at her and instantly tried to hide in her oversized jacket. Her index fingers tapped together in her trademark nervous gesture as she summoned the courage to speak. Ah, the Uzumaki stated coldly, it's you. What do you want? I've got, his unnerving grin grew ear to ear, business, with some people. The Hyuga squirmed under the pressure as she struggled to find the words. Normally she would have fainted by now, but the questions roaming her mind were far too important to ignore. Wanted to ask you about, The boy's grin vanished in a flash. Out with it, he calmly ordered in a voice that promised pain if she didn't get to the point immediately. I haven't got all day. About yesterday? An eyebrow arched. Yesterday? I saw you. A lot of people saw me. He interrupted to hasten the sluggish conversation, get to the point. She began recalling the images her bloodline viewed. Naruto impaling himself not once, but twice and coming out of both acts of self-mutilation like nothing was wrong. Tears began welling in her pale eyes and her voice failed. Waste of time, the immortal spat as he turned to leave. In a moment of panic, the blue-haired girl shouted, I saw why you hurt yourself in your R-room. This caught his attention, seeing as how he slowly swiveled in place to eye her with apprehension. Why did you hurt yourself? Her voice lowered due to the previous verbal outburst. Naruto's azure eyes went wide when he realized that the Hyuga girl observed the ritual in which he murdered that drunk whose foot he wounded. So far there's been nothing to pin the murders on me, he knew, but now. This was true. Since so few people were aware of how the bloody ceremony worked, no one could ever attribute the seemingly random killings to him. Even the aged Hokage couldn't convict him. There was always a lack of conclusive evidence and an absence of witnesses. Now that Hinata had seen him in the middle of all his glory, there was only one way to deal with her. He approached her while calmly unhooking the strap that kept his javelin on his crimson rope belt. It was a fortunate thing this was a back road, there was no one around. Just the way I like it. Naruto? The shy girl stuttered, nervously noting that he was wielding his strange weapon against her. What are you doing? He was nearly upon her as he raised his deadly instrument skyward for a downward jab. Getting rid of you. Tears began streaming down her cheeks before she fell to her knees and gripped her torso in an instinctual need to shield herself from the world. Her pale eyes gazed into the pure azure orbs of her killer to reveal sheer terror as her soft lips trembled in a futile attempt to beg for her life. Her mind was unprepared for the end to be so soon, even more so at the hands of the boy she looked up to. But the killing blow never came. The blonde Jashin follower saw the pure horror in his would-be victim's eyes and the fear pouring off her body. His lips parted in the widest smile he had ever felt. This was the kind of terror he had always fantasized about in his dreams that had remained elusive until now. It was simply the most beautiful sight of fear he had ever seen in his life. There was no way he could extinguish it so quickly. I should keep her alive, he concluded, to see this face of hers more and more. He lowered his weapon and leaned down to bring his face closer to hers. Do you want to know? He inquired with an expectant smile. He wanted to see how much of this perfect fright her features could portray if she knew the purpose of his inhuman ritual. She choked, her mind unable to deal with this turn of events. Her voice failed and she couldn't utter a word. It's a gift from my lord Jashin, he stated, one that allows me eternal life. Hinata's mind went blank as her consciousness finally caught up with her and she fainted from the undue stress. Her small frame went limp and she crashed against the ground. The Uzumaki's wide smile receded to a grin. This ravishing session of horror was over, for now. He scooped up her body and laid it against a nearby wall, all the while mightily resisting the urge to cut her pristine face. Fresh crimson blood would look stunning against her pearly flesh, that intensely adorable skin of hers. He realized that last notion was off-kilter and struck it from his mind before mentally repeating Jashin's commandments. It would not do to think this way. Naruto continued his inward chanting as he resumed his trek to pay a visit to the Haruno household. It was time for vengeance. Marizata Haruno sat comfortably in his living room. He arrived home not too long ago to an excited daughter and celebrated mildly with the girl at her acceptance into the ninja ranks. His wife was off shopping at the moment and his daughter headed out soon after his arrival to meet with some friends or bother Sasuke. Either way, he had the house to himself. Though the chair he sat upon was nice and cushy, he couldn't relax. The failed poisoning of the monster on his daughter's team weighed heavily on his mind. It must be the fox, he concluded, that's all it could be. The door to the hallway opened behind him and he knew his wife was home. Hey sweetie, he called without glancing back. He then heard his beloved's footsteps approach from behind and turned with a smile to greet the woman. And instead was met with the sight of the ebony-clad blonde demon that wore a perpetually cruel grin. Marizata attempted to bolt from his chair but an iron hand clamped over his throat to keep him seated as the limb's owner slowly brought his face closer. Hello, Mr. Haruno, Naruto addressed the would-be assassin with a wide grin. What the hell are you doing in my house? He gurgled as he wormed out of the fist enough to speak, you goddamn monster. The immortal chuckled. Such an accurate description, he stated before patting down the trapped man in search of something. Get the fuck out. Oh, the Uzumaki began innocently as he finally located what he sought. He unearthed a vial of pristine powdery poison from the victim's clothing. I don't think so. Marizata's eyes went wide. You knew? He sputtered. How? He smiled while clenching a fist around the glass tube. Lord Jashin told me. The moment those words left his lips he punched the back of the chair, shattering the fragile container in his closed palm. Now, open wide. What followed was perhaps the most hands-on murder the blonde had performed to date. The male Haruno struggled with all his might to keep his mouth shut while his appendages flailed in every direction to free his throat from the boy's death grip, but it was all for naught. Naruto scraped his hand as he forcibly pried open the man's jaw and bled plenty when the doomed individual bit down on the extension. But the immortal ignored the insignificant injuries with a chuckling grin as his hand bled profusely into Marizata's mouth, saturating the man with bitter poison and broken glass. After several violent minutes the boy yanked his fist free, leaving his hopeful assassin's mouth and lips a bloody mess. The dying man, now free of the vice-like clamp, launched himself from the chair in a futile effort to escape but didn't get very far. He instantly fell to the ground and began crawling away before his body began convulsing and his lungs hacked up dark crimson blood. His life flashed before his eyes and he saw it all. His birth, childhood, later years, his wife, his daughter, and then his vision cleared to reveal his murderer. So, the Uzumaki said with a smile, spicy, isn't it? He could see the desperation in the man's eyes and began trembling with excitement and laughter. His joviality grew as the sparkle faded from the newest victim's eyes and, seconds later, the Jashin follower cackled like a madman with his arms raised to the heavens. How is that, Lord Jashin? He exclaimed mightily, just what you wanted, right? He continued to laugh until the adrenaline died. That was exhilarating. Now he understood why many of Jashin's followers preferred to hold that aspect of their lord's gifts in reserve in lieu of the good old-fashioned way. With that, He smirked one final time at the blank eyes of the fresh corpse and promptly exited the house, taking care to shut the door behind him. His only regret was that he couldn't be there when the man's wife and daughter returned. Oh, how their agony would be joyous. The guards at the village gates took things easy. This time of year there was little traffic, so there wasn't much to defend from. Besides, threats were almost always spotted by the Anbu patrols outside the city walls. This duty was merely arbitrary. One of the two lazily glanced up from his magazine to find two figures strolling through the massive opening. "Hey, you," he called and waved them over. "What's your business?" "We don't need to go into that, do we?" The female of the pair cooed as she leaned across the simple desk. She had unusual turquoise hair that was combed to the side and wore no makeup. She was fairly pretty without it. She appeared to be in her early 20s and was donned in what could only be described as layered funeral attire held together by a loose red rope. Her clothes bulged unnaturally in odd places, but the guard was too busy being distracted by her batting eyelids and partially opened clothing. She wasn't wearing anything beneath those robes. "We're here for a funeral," the woman's companion commented with a maniacal smile that looked all too familiar. His body structure was unassuming, a mere 6 feet tall and what looked to be about 200 pounds give or take. In short, average. His brown lanky hair practically swayed in the minor breeze and he wore a sleeveless ebony shirt tucked into a matching pair of pants complete with a purely ornamental crimson rope. But what really attracted everyone's attention was the interconnecting steel cable looped around his body with various segments of the bizarre weapon welded to small scythe blades. The supposed handle of the device hung limply over his heart. "Whose funeral?" the undistracted guard inquired with apprehension. His partner was too busy trying to sneak a peek at the apparently uninhibited woman. "Hey, what the hell?" he expressed his shock when the aqua-haired woman suddenly reached into his fellow ninja's pants. "That'd be yours." The woman glanced over at the surprised shinobi as she squeezed gently. With that, an insane smile spread across her face and a staff that, upon closer inspection, was actually a continuously spiraling blade shot from the sleeve of her free arm and promptly impaled the captured man's heart. "Shit," the lone guard swore as he stood to take action. His eyes glanced at the other stranger to find a similarly crazed grin followed by the coil of blades slithering off his body, then, nothing. Every major organ was pierced simultaneously by the bizarre weapon and he didn't even have time to feel the pain. "Nice work," the woman stated with a fading smile as she retracted her buried hand. "What about the witnesses?" she inquired with a grim smile, noting the few people in the area who stared in horror and disbelief at what transpired. The average man smiled. "Do like Naruto does. Kill all the witnesses." With that, he pulled back on the lever of his odd-ranged weapon while his female companion rushed off on her own path of destruction. And true to the Uzumaki way, there were no survivors left to testify. That night, Hinata sat alone in her room embracing her pillow. She couldn't believe that the emerald-eyed boy she admired was an immortal. That simply wasn't possible, was it? He said it was a gift from Lord Jashin, but who is Jashin? She raised her moist, pale eyes and gazed out the window at the moonless evening. An aura of malevolence weighed on her soul, but she couldn't put a finger on why such a feeling permeated her soul. It felt as if there were some force of pure evil staring straight through her with unseen eyes. But what if he was telling the truth? She wondered, what if he is immortal? He would never be hurt. She smiled humbly at that thought. At least he would be safe from bodily harm. But at what cost? His mind? His personality? His humanity? No, she tightened her grip on the unfortunate pillow. It can't be good. It's turned him into someone he's not. Her gaze intensified in the silent dark. No, I think Naruto is still in there somewhere. He just needs help escaping. But no one will get close to him. That notion brought about a rare surge of determination in the dainty Hyuga. "I'll do it," she whispered to no one. "Please wait for me, Naruto. I want to help you, understand you?" She placed her pillow in the correct position and laid her head down. "Please God," she murmured, "I've never asked anything of you, but please give me the courage to help Naruto." The next day began on a positive note in Naruto's perspective. He was joyful beyond comparison when Sakura showed up with tear-stained cheeks and red eyes. She had obviously spent the previous evening bawling her eyes out. The blonde wouldn't have it any other way. Kakashi, however, didn't see things that way. Knowing that the murderous boy wouldn't be affected by death like everyone else, he promptly adjourned the team for the day. There would be no missions for a few days or, at least, until after Marizada's funeral. The Hitaki briefly wondered if the blonde would show up to desecrate the poor man's resting place but rapidly banished the thought. It won't do me any good to think about things I can't prevent. But still, he stole a glance at the Uzumaki. He's pretty heartless. The immortal decided to wander outside the town in search of victims. Anyone not within the confines of the village was far more vulnerable, seeing as how the outlying towns possessed no ninjas to speak of. Besides, there was always the possibility of butchering the small town. The boy made a mental note to make that his next goal in his climb to being Lord Jashin's high priest. He started for the gates and noticed the large blood stains dotting the road when he reached the oversized entrance. Huh, he muttered to no one, a massacre, and I wasn't invited? He scowled at the lost opportunity and decided that the town slaughtering would have to wait. First he needed to find the bastards who murdered all these people and inflict some pain for not letting him in on it. This was his territory, and he wanted to make damn sure everybody knew it. He began his casual investigation at the hospital. Predictably, the staff attempted to turn him away at the door, but it was nothing a foot to the nuts or a fist to the ovaries couldn't solve. Entering the establishment, he was forced to utilize all his willpower to resist visiting every single admitted patient. This place was rife with physical torment and suffering just the way he liked it. Minutes passed and he located the morgue and promptly entered without slowing. Grinning as he spied a tag that read, Haruno, he continued until he located the newest batch of corpses. He stared in awe at the mix of precision piercings and brutal cuts, and the gears began turning in his mind. I've seen this before, he thought out loud before exiting the facility. He was acting on a hunch that, if what he imagined was true, meant he was no longer the lone believer of Jashin in Konoha at the moment. He made his way to the red light district of the town. It was fairly deserted during the day, but that wouldn't matter if his gut turned out to be correct. After popping his head into several brothels and earning the curious stares of passers-by and prostitutes alike, he finally found a pleasure palace that seemed a bit odd. It was empty. Figuring that this was the place, he strolled in and began searching the rooms one by one, gradually making his way towards a constant noise at the end of the hall. He noted that each chamber was stacked with mostly naked corpses, and he finally paused before the door at the end of the corridor. He could hear shouting and moaning on the other side. Well, here it is. The blonde swung the door open and was instantly confronted by an incredibly lewd scene. A young woman with brilliant turquoise hair was busy, interacting, with a man who was clearly terrified. Apparently the only way this doomed individual could perform at all was due to an adrenaline rush. He seemed to grasp the dangerous situation in which he was trapped. The woman's head casually swiveled to view the Uzumaki and she grinned upon sight of him. Hey, Naruto, she greeted before grasping her short spiraling blade staff, jabbing it through the unfortunate man's heart, and trembled as the action got her kicks for her. The blonde's face blushed but did not betray any shame, otherwise he was still unused to this woman and her ways. Asha, he addressed the fellow Jashin follower, I see her in town. Yeah, she panted, coming down from her climax, me and Deadman. Deadman? He sneered, that's just great. It was a good thing the day began on a high note, because it was going downhill fast. Asha hailed from the southern countries of the continent. The traditions down there weren't as inhibited, so she led a naturally promiscuous life. She was renowned amongst Jashin's followers as the one who got off from most to her victims' deaths. It was rumored that, in addition to her unique spiraling weapon, she also carried a hollow cylindrical tube that could be used on both ends. This device in and of itself only served to display Ash's fascination with intercourse, but it was also said to be her secondary tool of murder. Apparently, with the flick of a wrist, the device's ingrained steel barbs could be flexed outward or inward, depending on the victim's gender. In conclusion, Asha was a murderous temptress who generally put a smile on her prey's faces before ending their lives. Deadman was another story altogether. He was far older than Asha, although no one knew by how much Jashin's loyal aged differently than those cursed with mortality. No one actually knew the man's name either, he went by an alias. It was doubtful that even Deadman himself knew his original name by now. He was also notorious for not using Jashin's gift of the blood sacrifice to kill. Rather, he preferred utilizing his cabled scythe blades for his work. It was said that on occasion, when backed into a corner, He could butcher dozens of people with a single jab to his own heart. Of course, Naruto had never witnessed this himself, but rumors about the cult's members proved to be true more often than not. "What the hell are you doing here?" the blonde inquired dully as the attractive woman got dressed. "Pilgrimage," she replied simply. "What about Deadman?" "Pilgrimage, too." He frowned. "Why are you both here, then? We're only supposed to take pilgrimages as a group every couple of years." "I know." She folded the second robe over her nude body and began working on the third one. "I met Deadman right outside the city gates. We're both here by coincidence." The Uzumaki grimaced. There was nothing he could do about this. Those who followed Jashin were required to take at least one personal pilgrimage every 5 years or so outside of the cult's sectarian journeys. He himself hadn't been on one yet. The time when he needed to do so was drawing near. "So how much longer are you two gonna be here?" he asked. "This is my village." "We haven't completed our kill count yet," she responded innocently. "I figured I could rack up a good number here before moving on." Naruto's mood didn't lighten at all. Naturally, the pilgrimages of Jashin's believers were not measured in days or destinations. They were measured in blood. And Deadman? Probably the same. He glared at her, then raised a finger. "Now listen here," he lectured in a tone that promised death to the immortal woman. "This is my village, my territory. You two aren't welcome here. Rack up a few sacrifices, then leave." Now it was Ash's turn to frown. Sure, having two religious journeys coinciding in a town where a believer already resided increased the chances of said city being wiped out, but what did Naruto care? It shouldn't have made a difference to him whether or not Konoha lived or died. Unless, she thought of something. "Did you get attached to something here?" she inquired casually, attempting to bait the young boy. "You know we're not supposed to hang on to material things." Her green eyes glazed over and she chanted, "Abandon the world of the living and all things within. Life is but an illusion which leads unto death, and death is the true beginning of life. Blood shall be the currency unto the gates of death." The boy continued with the next verse, "And the gates shall open for all who call upon Jashin, Lord and Master of the underworld beneath the universe. And so it shall be." A voice spoke from behind the duo and Deadman strolled through the empty doorway with cabled scythes drenched in blood. "That the blood given in payment shall drive the underworld beneath the universe into the world of the living where all who believe shall live eternal. Amen." The trio ended the prayer simultaneously. "I overheard you, Naruto," the unassuming killer stated calmly amidst the bloodbath that was the brothel room. "And while I understand that you want this town for yourself, you would do well not to fall into materialism. Such a thing is heresy." "I know," said Blonde nodded, "but it wouldn't be heresy for you two to move on as soon as possible. After all, it doesn't matter where you make the sacrifices, just as long as you do." The plain newcomer smirked. Funny, coming from a fellow believer who has yet to take a pilgrimage. Asha snorted as she stifled a laugh and butted into the conversation before it could escalate. Hey, leave him alone. If we rack up all our kills here, he's gonna have to move in order to break even. How would you like it if we came through your territory and sacrificed everyone before you could get any?" Deadman regarded her with haughty eyes and an unpleasant smile. "Good point," he conceded before addressing the immortal demon container again. "We'll hang around for a while and keep quiet. I know you have a way of doing things here, so we'll abide by your methods." The Uzumaki mulled the proposal over in his mind for a minute before nodding. "All right, by my rules only." Not even the elderly Hokage knew that Jashin's followers were designated into separate territories, the size of set areas depending on the associated believer's power and prestige. Naruto only had official say over Konoha, the smallest possible district that could be appointed. While Asha and Deadman were within the city's walls, they were required by dogma to adhere to the boy's way of doing things whenever sacrifices were concerned. Everything else was fair game. "Fair enough," the man nodded before turning to leave. "Now if you'll excuse me, I've got some prayers to perform." "Hey," Asha called after him while tugging on the immortal blonde's clothing with her thumb and index finger. "We should have a three-way." The man halted before he could disappear from view, turned in place, and eyed both occupants apprehensively. "I doubt our combined lust could match yours," he stated, referring to himself and the Uzumaki. "Oh, come on," she whined playfully, "it'll be fun. We're all immortal." "I'll pass." Deadman turned her down. "I'd rather get my rituals done for the day." A desperate smile etched across her lips and she turned to the remaining individual. "How about it, Naruto? Just you and me." His heart thumped noticeably faster. After all, he was still a boy in the fledgling stages of puberty. And, as the female killer pointed out, they were both immortal. "I'll pass on that too." He raised both palms against her. "I've got better things to do." "Ah, come on," she pleaded. "Geez," he mused, "I've never seen anyone go through this much withdrawal." Making for the door unimpeded, he denied her again. "Just go to another brothel and kill one of the workers. I'm sure none of the guys'll notice." As Naruto left, he heard Asha scuffling to act on his advice. He shook his head and chuckled even though he wasn't happy these two were in town. To be sure, all of Jashin's disciples were cordial to one another, but none of them were friendly. Asha was, by far, the most outgoing of them that he knew of, and that was only because of her peculiar tastes. She herself didn't really possess any interests outside lust. Then again, I'm not much different. I probably like seeing the fear in someone's eyes before they die as much as Asha gets off on her victims. With that in mind, he noticed that the noonday sun was upon him and winced at how much time he wasted. There wasn't much of a point in traveling to a neighboring town and slaughtering its inhabitants. Now he had to keep an eye on the newcomers. He turned Deadman's words over in his mind and found that he was bothered by the fact that the older man called his desire to protect his interests in Konoha heresy. "It's not heresy," he assured himself, "as long as I don't get attached to anyone or anything. It's not heresy to find pleasure in the fear of others." That thought process instantly brought to mind Anko and Hinata. Of course, he chalked those two up as special due to the Mitarashi's inherent sadism and the Hyuga's perfect terror. Little did he know that his subconscious categorized them for different reasons altogether, but he dwelled no further on that topic. Speaking of Hinata, he mused, she's probably home by now. Or at least she will be in a few hours. I think I'll go see that face of hers again. Naruto arrived at the Hyuga mansion after a few hours. He took his sweet time getting there. There was no rush, so he traversed the scenic route. Not that he really cared for the sights, he was permanently angry at the world, but he wanted to be sure Hinata was there when he arrived. Waiting around with nothing to do sucked even worse. Well, I could always slaughter the Hyuga family. He tinkered with the giddy notion of beginning his impending pilgrimage with the self-centered clan, but I'd probably get caught pretty quick. He stepped through the impressive ivory gates and strode into the courtyard unhindered, ignoring the glares of the pale-eyed individuals. Such a task was simple for him. The blonde subconsciously despised all things arrogant, and the Hyugas easily fell under that category. Approaching a random passerby, he inquired as to the whereabouts of a certain preteen. He stated, "Is Hinata here?" The person's eyes dimmed. "You do not have permission to be here," he spoke, "leave before you are escorted out." The boy's lips cracked in his trademark grin. "What are you gonna do, kill me for trespassing? I will say this one last time, leave." Others took note of the Uzumaki's defiance and began crowding around him to offer their comrade assistance. His azure eyes glanced back and forth while his smirk didn't move. "Let me think about it. There is nothing to consider." He placed harsh fingers on the boy's shoulder. "You will leave now." He glared at the offending limb with glee. "Nah." With that, he grasped the hand and wrenched it away. A foreign palm slammed into the back of his head and he felt a glut of charca surge into his skull. The only effect it had was his eyes rolling back into their respective sockets before he ducked and jabbed outwards with his javelin, extracting a random sample of blood. This led to the defenders rushing him. He tucked and rolled from the fray while attempting to lick the warm plasma from his weapon while still in motion. The result was him standing humorously with a spike sticking all the way through his mouth. With a sickening squelch he yanked the spiked pole free and proceeded to mark the ground with his flowing blood, struggling to maintain balance every time a fistful of chakra plummeted into him. In seconds, the cursed seal was complete and his body morphed into the animated voodoo doll that was synonymous with Jashin's devout. The javelin traveled through his heart and the unfortunate Hyuga fell to the ground while clutching the sudden gaping wound in his chest. The others didn't seem to instantly grasp the situation, despite their advertised intelligence. Their arms continued to pummel the boy to no avail and they didn't halt to consider that maybe, just maybe, this intruder couldn't be taken down by their closely guarded techniques. Of course, who could? The Hyuga gentle fist style was superior to all others, wasn't it? At some point in the skirmish, Naruto's bladed rod caught a chunk of flesh and sent blood flying in a wide, graceful arc. This caught the blonde's eye and his smile widened while his wild swinging became swifter. His lungs expanded and contracted with crazed laughter at the sight of smooth slick plasma dancing in the air, growls and shouts of frustration from his attackers filling the wind. "This is great," he yelled when his excitement peaked, "this is awesome. Thank you Lord Jashin." "And Naruto," a soft voice came from nowhere, "What are you doing?" "Shit." One of the Hyugas panicked upon the realization that the unofficially disowned heiress was at the scene of battle, Lady Hinata. The bladed edge of the javelin pierced his throat and he collapsed, drowning in his own blood. From there on the valiant efforts of the defenders fell apart. One by one the guards faltered and unwillingly allowed themselves to be injured. The blonde killer would then systematically ingest their blood and let the others strike him. They did all the damage themselves without even realizing it. In the end, there was but one man standing, and a simple jab to the boy's heart destroyed his own life-giving organ. Seconds later, the small team of men lied in an ever-widening pool of crimson glass. "Hinata," the Uzumaki greeted the trembling preteen, "there you are." Said girl fell to her knees and cradled her small frame with trembling arms in a subconscious attempt to defend herself. Her pale eyes clearly witnessed the calm killer wading through the massive puddle of blood with an inhuman smile etched into his lips, the warm fluid sticking to his sandals as he lifted his feet. What did you do? She stuttered, horrified of the sight before her. Why did you kill those men? He knelt and immersed his hands in the blood, then approached her, cupping her face with tainted palms. "I came to see your face again," he stated with a manic smile. That deep crimson gore looked so invigorating on her. The young Hyuga was on the verge of hyperventilating when he ran his fingers across her cheeks toward her lips. The only thing that disallowed her from fainting was sheer terror. What would he do to her if she wasn't conscious? That notion kept her awake, for now. She gasped when he ran a thumb over her lower lip and she could taste acrid copper. Naruto was ecstatic. His arms moved like still air as he traced the thick red fluid across her cheeks and over her lips. "This is great," he whispered to himself, unaware that he was talking out loud, "so great." His hands danced up to her eyes and gingerly smeared more blood from the corners like waterfalls of deadly tears. Out of morbid fascination, his face moved closer to hers to achieve the best possible view. Right now the total terror in her eyes had his full attention. "You," the tip of his nose graced hers, "are so perfect." Hinata couldn't take any more and promptly passed out. Not even fear could keep her conscious at this point. Simple physical contact under normal circumstances would have had her heart pounding, but now that this grotesquely pseudo-UAL moment was upon her, sleep was the only acceptable escape. The blonde noted the sudden limpness and sighed. His fun was over. For now. He started laying the girl down, then thought of something. "Oh, this could be great," he commented to no one. Hoisting the preteen off the ground, he trudged over to the large bloody puddle, then gently set her down in its center. "Oh, what I wouldn't give for a picture." Another idea struck him and his grin widened even further. "But a souvenir I can handle." He smeared his bloodied hands down the center lining of her jacket, barely able to contain his excitement. His sliced heart felt as if it would burst through his punctured chest as his fingers ran along the length of her slender body as he completed the task before unzipping the stained clothing. He eased her out of the oversized jacket, mashed it to his face, and took a deep whiff, ignoring the droplets entering his lungs. "Ah," he exhaled with a smile, "good memories." "You there?" a voice interrupted his revelry. "Halt. Time to book," he commented to himself, wrapping the wet jacket over his neck in a single swing. He charged out of the complex with diminishing bloody footprints. A few minutes of running through back alleys saved him from discovery, although the description of an ebony-clad blonde youth covered in gore narrowed the options considerably. He would eventually have to fix that. He traveled home through such passageways in a hopeful attempt to remain hidden. His untimely capture would not do. "Hey," a sly feminine voice greeted, "what's up?" The blonde spun in place with wide eyes, relaxing when he recognized the figure on an overhang. "Asha," he sighed in relief, "don't do that again." "Why?" Her sadistic grin prevailed, "Is there reason to worry?" "You're immortal?" Yeah, he waved her off, "It's the way I do things." "Get used to it." "Fine," she cooed with disturbing allure. Still can't figure out why you're running from those Hyugas, though. It's not like they can actually hurt you. His eyes narrowed. You saw all that? Yep, her smirk withstood the conversation, even that girl's little gift. What's your point? You wouldn't happen to be getting attached, would you? He cocked an eyebrow. Me? Attached? I saw that little scene, she continued with her usually sensuous voice. I saw the desire in your eyes and the fear in hers. You wanted her, but you didn't kill her. What's your point? Come on, she replied amorously, don't try and hide it from me. You find pleasure in the fear of your kills. I should know, all of us have special tastes. His arm moved to wield his sharpened javelin. Do you want me to kill you? She giggled. You really think you can? I did it before. He referred to the night he became a follower of Jashin. I can do it again. She considered smugly. Fair enough. I don't care to die yet. Asha licked her lips and continued. But there are some other things you can do to me. Forget it. Sorry I asked. He honestly wasn't into her twisted hobbies. But you will keep this from Deadman. But I'll need something in return. How about me not killing you? That won't be enough, she blinked. How about a trade? His eyes narrowed. What do you have in mind? She rolled off her precipice and traced a finger over his chest. One night between two immortals. Naruto sneered. No. He impaled her through the stomach and pushed her to the wall, embedding the other end of the javelin between the bricks. The turquoise-haired immortal shivered before turning to the blonde. You sure? She stated with a sultry smile. You're nailing me already? The Uzumaki's cheeks reddened at the implication, but otherwise his features displayed annoyance. He retracted his weapon, holstered it, and laid out a compromise. Listen, how would you like it if I took all your kills before you could have your fun with them? She thought about it whimsically. That'd suck. I like playing with my victims. Exactly, he nodded, that's the situation here. Like you said, I like seeing the fear in my victims' eyes before they die, and I've never seen more perfect terror in anyone other than Hinata. Really? Yeah, she sighed. Fine, but be careful that you don't get attached. Sinning against the words of Jashin would be too grave for me to let go simply because you want me to. Finish your business here then leave, he threatened one final time before stalking off. He was hoping to wash the blood off before it hardened on his flesh, and if that was going to happen then he'd have to ditch Asha now. Alright, she resigned herself to the blonde's demands as the resident immortal left her. Hinata, huh? She was pretty cute, and he never said anything about not visiting her. Hiyashi Hyuga towered over the scene of the massacre, his cold calculating eyes burning with white-hot rage at the sight of his consistently disappointing daughters smothered in the blood of his slain brethren. Hinata. He barked at the ashamed girl who stood before him. What happened here? The young girl desperately wanted to hide from her father's ire. Not even her large jacket was left to provide a minute source of comfort. What the blonde could have wanted with it was beyond her, but she wondered if she even wanted to know. But one thing was clear to her, she was apparently the only witness who knew for certain that it was Naruto, and if she told her clan it was he who slaughtered the guards then the boy would be killed, immortal or not. She didn't want her source of inspiration to leave her, she wanted to pay back the blonde for everything he unconsciously did for her by saving him from his misguided beliefs. She swallowed and gathered her courage as best she could. This would take every ounce of willpower. I don't know, father? What do you mean you don't know? I was knocked unconscious, and the intruder didn't kill or kidnap you. The timid preteen attempted to nod but was shut down before she could truly answer. Instead, he lays you in the middle of all the blood and steals your clothing. You know more than you're telling me. I don't lie. He accented his anger by backhanding the shy girl. Why are you protecting the intruder? I am not, she began tearing up, I'm not protecting anyone. I gave you an order, he hit her again, rendering her a sniffling lump on the ground. He snorted and turned on his heel. I was right. You're truly an irredeemable failure. Hiyashi entered the mansion and left behind his weeping daughter. As the clan head strolled through the compound, his eyes rested on a wary branch member, one whom he recognized as possessing great talent. He halted beside the individual and addressed him without making eye contact. Find out who did this and kill him. What of Lady Hinata? The heartless man considered. If you find her protecting this person, kill her as well. With that, he continued on his way. Yes, Lord Hiyashi, Neji grudgingly accepted the order. If things turned out well, he would gain some small measure of favor in the main family while dispensing justice upon his unworthy cousin. A pair of pale eyes watched intently as the mutilated corpses were hauled away amidst the miniature lake of blood. More specifically, they observed the distraught girl crying her eyes out against the dirt. Are you really protecting the person who did this? The owner of the eyes pondered, and if you are, why? Who could be so important that you would defy father? Lady Hanabi, a branch member in charge of the young Hyuga's care, interrupted the internal monologue. Please refrain from sullying yourself from viewing such disgraceful scenes. The girl eyed the attendant and strode off. She hated how people told her what to do. I'll watch my sister and find out who did this myself. Hours later, Naruto stepped out of the shower while toweling off his head. It took forever to finally wash the blood from his body. His clothes weren't an issue. Ebony robes soaked up blood without leaving a trace, as long as one didn't include the smell. But that merely served to keep people away from him, a desirable effect. He tossed the towel on his bed and slipped into a fresh pair of dark pants. The other pair was still wet and paused when a knock emanated from the door. Shit, did they figure it out? He wondered before grasping his javelin and holding it behind his back as he answered the door. Hello? Hey, Naruto. A boisterous voice shouted as Anko burst into the room. How ya doin'? He sighed in relief for a second time that day. Anko, don't do that. Come on, she slapped his shoulder with a smile. I just wanted to. Hey, what's with the weapon? Nothing. The blonde stabbed the javelin into the floorboards and shut the door. Why are you here? An eyebrow rose with a hesitant smile. Yeah, I brought dinner. She produced a hefty bag, lifting it into the air triumphantly. The immortal glared at her for a few awkward seconds before speaking. Okay, table's over there. He still wasn't used to being around this woman. This made what, 3 times in 3 days? And what was with all the food? Did he look malnourished or something? Wait, what do I care? It's a free meal. Having said that, the Uzumaki plopped down on the now crowded dining table and stared at the Mitarashi as she produced various foodstuffs from the bag. Fruits, vegetables, instant ramen, and, of course, dango. The snake charmer eyed him curiously and asked, "No shirt?" "My house," he replied quickly. This woman might have been a fellow sadist, but he was growing weary of her presence rather quickly. Anko was rapidly approaching the boundaries of his patience. Just took a very long hot shower. Suit yourself, she shrugged, boiling some water for the noodles before taking a seat across from him. I heard about your teammate's dad. She tried to break into a conversation. Ah, he smirked to the side. Yeah. Sorry to hear it. Yeah, he supposedly agreed with widening lips. So sorry. That didn't sound right to her. You didn't? He gazed at her with satisfied eyes. And what if I did? Oh, no way, she gaped. No fucking way. Have I admitted anything yet? You didn't kill him, did you? Fucking hell, Naruto, did you? She was obviously having problems wrapping her head around this. He never broke his smirk as he bit into an apple. Good stuff, What the hell? She stood in frustration and began pacing. Naruto, why did you do this? Why? His smile vanished. He tried to poison me. I returned the favor. She cocked her head at this. He what? Did I stutter? He tried to poison you? Really? When? He took another bite. When you treated me to ramen yesterday. He and Ayame slipped poison into my bowl. She paused to recall the event. Sure enough, everything added up. The teen's sudden shock, Naruto's spicy ramen. Wait, why didn't it work? She instantly winced at the question. She was positive the fox kept him safe. I'm immortal, he replied matter-of-factly. Wah, how? I follow Jashin. He grinned and juice dribbled down his mouth, and he grants me eternal life as long as I serve him. Anko couldn't believe her ears. This fellow outcast was immortal? Well, I guess it makes sense since he doesn't care what others think about him. She retook her seat and gazed intently into his bored eyes. When did this happen? Long time ago. I got time. The blonde stared at her for a moment then sighed in resignation. Fine. He casually launched into the simple history that was his life. How his treatment as a child led to his conversion, how his beliefs dictated his murderous habits, how life pretty much sucked in general with his sole pleasure residing in the pain of others. The Mitarashi was speechless at the end of the one-sided conversation. She sat motionless for a few seconds then stood to pour the boiling water into the multiple ramen cups. After that, she placed the paper bowls on the table and reseated herself with a blank gaze. So, what now? What do you mean? What now? She repeated herself. What's left? You're immortal, so you'll never die. What's there to live for? I enjoy the fear in my enemies' eyes before they die. But then what? She interrupted. The more you do it, the older it'll get. At some point it won't be as fun anymore, and then what? The blonde stared at her quizzically. He never really considered this. Yeah, sure, Anko had no idea what his life was like, but she was older, she had more experience simply because she had been around longer than him. His mind envisioned a world where killing was mundane and living wasn't much better, where everyone still despised him for who he was and he hated them back for it, and the countless eons that would pass until his constant state of boredom would finally come to a close. But then his loyalty would earn him a seat at the side of Lord Jashin himself. The immortal's sacrifices would pave the way for his rebirth into a glorious world of inconsequential murder, and he would be free to do anything. That would be worth it. He knew, life everlasting. My sacrifice will be worth it, he smiled smugly, although he was personally petrified that he would have to spend millennia with nothing fun to do. It will? She replied apprehensively. Yeah, she shook her head at the table. You know, she wanted to change the subject. I don't really get it. Why kill innocent people? I mean, I know you're immortal and all, but they are not innocent. He slammed his fist into the table. Everyone I've ever killed deserved it. Every last one of them. Anko's eyes widened at the outburst. The immortal had always been so cool and collected, even if it was in an insane kind of way. This was highly out of character for him, a fact which only went to show what he really felt about the situation. All of them. All of them. His pupils shifted into crimson and became that of an animal's. Searing hatred leaked from his sockets and weighed the room under its malevolent pressure. The snake mistress glanced at the table to collect her thoughts before returning her gaze to the blonde. Naruto, she began morosely to hopefully calm him. I know you've had a harsh life and I know you have a lot of good reasons to hate everyone in the village. I know what that's like. When Orochimaru abandoned me and I returned to the village, only a few people tolerated me. The rest treated me like a traitor even though I never harbored ill will towards my home. I feel them staring at me to this day, and a lot of them piss me off so bad I want to kill them, but they don't deserve to die for being assholes. All the ones I've killed have tried to kill me. He kept his rage alive. She nodded. I understand, and I won't try to tell you that you were wrong in taking revenge against those who deserve it, but, well, frankly, you scare away everyone who might accept you for who you are. His breathing eased and he killed his anger a bit. For who I am, why should I care? I serve Jashin, and there's nothing else I need. Why is that? What would be so wrong with having a few good friends? His mood finally resumed normality. That's heresy. Abolish all forms of weakness and embrace chaos. Affection clouds the mind and stays the killing blow. Take up hatred and abandon love. Is that a law of the Jashin religion? That's so fucked up. She reached forward and grasped his hand, grimacing at how he instantly retracted the limb. Why is friendship heresy? He glared at her. I just told you. It weakens the mind. This didn't sound right to her. Are you sure? I don't think so. Get out. Wah, get out. Naruto, He stood so quickly his chair flew back. I said get out. Get out of my house before I kill you. The Mitarashi closed her eyes, breathed deeply, and rose from her stool. The Uzumaki obviously didn't wish to continue and there was nothing she could do about that. She strode to the door, opened it, and glanced back before leaving. Naruto, she spoke softly, I don't know why your religion wants you to be alone, but I know it hurts to be alone. With that, she exited the shoddy household and shut the door behind her. The blonde stared after her a few moments longer. Peef. Friends, Heresy, right. He eyed the cooling cups of noodles before pulling them towards himself. At least she left the food. Shoveling a wad of the stuff down his gullet, he realized that he had confessed to the murder of Marizata Haruno to his guest. Well, only one thing to do. Said course of action involved a single shadow clone that would follow the woman to her home and, if need be, silence her. Kakashi stood a respectable distance from Naruto's home in order to monitor his disturbing student's behavior. Imagine his surprise when of all people Anko Mitarashi emerged from the blonde's dwelling after a bout of yelling. Curious, he shimmered from his position and appeared near the snake charmer as she trudged home. Lovers spat? He broke the ice with a bad joke. Huh? Oh, it's you. Get lost. He chuckled to hide his embarrassment at being blown off. Oh, come on now, Anko. I'm trying to be friendly here. Well, ain't you a nice guy? Beat it. The Hitaki decided to utilize the serious approach rather than try and ease into a conversation. I noticed that you were with my student. Notice anything unusual? She spared him a glance. Nope, was the simple reply. She didn't know if Kakashi was aware of his pupil's religious affiliation, so she decided to keep it under wraps. Have you heard of the incident at the Hyuga mansion today? He got straight to the point. She frowned. No. Ah, well, let me bring you up to speed. The Mitarashi held her emotions and initial reactions in check as the silver-haired Jonin informed her of the massacre earlier that afternoon. Sadly, it sounded exactly like Naruto's handiwork, but it also sounded like the deceased guards had it coming. After all, they did attack the blonde, despite him being a fellow shinobi who didn't appear to come bearing ill will. Well, okay, that might not be true. She realized that last bit might be erroneous on her part, but I doubt he waltzed in there just to kill a few guards. So, Kakashi concluded with an inquiry, what do you make of all this? She shrugged. It's a damn shame. You know, you're starting to sound like Naruto. Maybe I should keep an eye on you too. You know, she stopped and glared at the one-eyed man. You should keep an eye on yourself. That kid's gone through enough trouble without assholes like you breathing down his neck all the time. Maybe if you left him alone he would open up to people. This caught the elite shinobi off guard. Anko, I know you went through a lot, but I assure you, Naruto's situation is complicated. You ever heard of the cult of Jashin? Oh, that? Yeah, he told me all about it. He also told me about when he converted. He did? Not even he had heard this story. Yeah, and you know what? It's a wonder he hasn't killed everyone in the village by now. She took a deep breath before preparing to leave the man in the dust. I don't blame him for it, either. Not one bit. As the Mitarashi continued home, a certain blonde clone dispersed itself in the shadows to relay what it heard to the original. Said Uzumaki straightened at his mostly complete meal when the memories flooded into his mind. She stood up for me. He wondered, unfamiliar with the sentiment of doing such a thing for someone else. Why'd she do that? Hinata rocked back and forth with her knees tucked into her arms while bathed in the moonlight. Trails of dried salty liquid stained her cheeks as her pale eyes matched the brilliant celestial satellite. Naruto? She stared out the window in sorrow over her beloved's unstoppable bloodlust. For a brief moment she wondered what she could possibly do to return his humanity, then a horrifying thought struck her. What if he doesn't want help? What if he wants to remain a murderer? A sudden silhouette darkened her window, eliciting a gasp from the preteen. Hey there, Hinata, the female figure stated wistfully, that is you, right? She had no idea how to respond to that. Yes. Ah, you really are a cute one. Too bad you're off limits. I think. What? The individual laughed. And so modest, too. I can see how Naruto could get used to you. The mere mention of the blonde's name instantly caught her attention. You know Naruto? Once again, that laugh resounded through the room. You bet. And according to him, I'm not allowed to touch you, at least, not to kill you. What do you mean? She shuddered at the insinuation. But I'm sure he'd throw a fit anyway. The stranger ignored him. But I'd like to know exactly why he fancies you. He said you have something like the perfect fear in your eyes or something like that. You're not going to hurt me, are you? Nah, tempting though. An awkward silence passed as the Hyuga mulled over what the stranger told her. You said Naruto fancies me? Her stutter hit a particularly nasty snag as her brain tried to wrap around that statement. What do you mean? I meant what I said. He likes the fear in your eyes. Apparently it's the best. A yawn came through. I'm tempted to check it out for myself, but I'm not into that kind of stuff. That kind of stuff? You know, the whole getting off on terror thing. Personally, I like pleasure much more than pain. The shadow giggled upon noticing Hinata shiver. Looks like you know what I'm talking about. I figured if you could appease him, you could appease me. The blue-haired preteen gasped. Was she hearing this woman correctly? But it's not looking that way, unfortunately. I don't think I get much fun out of it. The girl swallowed to gather her courage. She couldn't allow herself to falter now that matters concerning her beloved were involved. Answer my question, she demanded nervously. She sighed. Good lord, you kids are pushy as hell. Fine, I'll tell you. Her head glanced at the young girl to ensure she was paying attention. She wouldn't be repeating anything. Naruto's pretty damn close to committing heresy with you. Hell, he's already borderline sinning. What do you mean? He's latched onto your fear in particular. Our faith in Lord Jashin dictates that we are not to cling to things in the material world, and right now he's protecting you from us. The Hyuga blushed profusely upon hearing this. He's protecting me? But then an observation raised a red flag in her mind. Us? Yep, me and the other guy. We call him Deadman. I might be willing to do things Naruto's way, but Deadman might get pissed when Naruto tells him you're off limits and kill you just to make a point. Why are you telling me this? The figure shrugged. I dunno, guess I'm bored. You know, she continued with a suddenly sly voice, I'm willing to make a deal with you. A deal? Yeah, I'll teach you everything you need to know about Lord Jashin's commandments and in return. She trailed off with a smug chuckle. In return, let me sleep with you. It came out more like a plea than an offer. No, came the instant response, what are you thinking? Goo, no one wants to screw these days. What is wrong with you? Hey, I haven't introduced myself yet. Hinata was stunned at the pure obliviousness of this woman. What? I'm Asha, she waved through the streaming moonlight, what's up? Early the next morning, the Hyuga heiress awoke and left the mansion, oblivious to the two trailing her. Her conversation with Asha the previous evening had been revealing, and while she was hesitantly relieved that the overt woman claimed that she would be left alone, the blue-haired girl was intensely worried about this Deadman character. Apparently, unlike Naruto and Asha, Deadman reveled in the actual act of killing rather than any of its accompanying side effects. According to the temptress, she had to avoid shadowy places and stick to public roads if she valued her life. Deadman would operate by the Uzumaki's methods, that is, to kill without witnesses. Hinata swiftly scaled the steps to the blonde's apartment and stood before the door with a heaving chest. She was nervous. Desperately slowing her breath, she forced her heart rate to safe levels and knocked. Her heart almost stopped when it finally opened to reveal a shirtless Naruto clutching his trademark javelin. Why am I so damn popular? He whined as the door swung. His eyes brightened upon seeing her and his lips cracked into a sick smile. Hinata, back for more? She stammered while tapping her fingers. I came to talk with you, Naruto. His smirk held steadfast as he stepped aside and cleared an imaginary path with his unique weapon. Hinata nervously strode in, her pale eyes rapidly scanning the shoddy apartment. The place was humble, bordering on rundown with the walls and floor dotted with stains that stunk of old blood. For that matter, the entire place reeked of the natural liquid. This was more like a crime scene rather than a place where someone lived. The Hyuga made her way into the space that served as the living room and turned to look the blonde in the eye, put off by the fact his pleased facial expressions hadn't changed since he allowed her passage. You wanted to talk? Yes, she yelped. About, I met Asha last night. His mood died. What? Yes, she nodded, she came to my window last night. Damn it, he swore and stomped around in a distracted circle before returning to the girl. Did she do anything to you? I swear I'm gonna kill her if she did. She didn't. She said she just wanted to meet me. He eyed her apprehensively. Is that it? No threats? Her cheeks burned deep crimson and her eyes turned downwards. Right, no threats? Ah, the Uzumaki nodded. He could tell by Hinata's reaction that Asha offered to make some kind of deal with her. Anything else? She told me about Deadman and about some kind of heresy. He frowned. There was that abominable word again. What heresy? He had to know. She didn't say. The blonde glared at her for a moment, wondering why Asha walked such a thin line in his territory. One thing's for sure, though, Deadman must never catch Hinata alone. His eyes rolled in their sockets and found the special souvenir he took from the girl, his lips splitting apart in glee at the memory. You want your jacket back? Huh? This caught her by surprise. If you don't mind? He contemplated seeing her in that tainted clothing for a moment, then walked off to retrieve it. After doing so, he tossed it back to her and she yelped at the sight of crimson-painted beige flying at her as her dainty arms rose to catch it. What happened to it? You can have it back on one condition. He approached her, practically raping her personal space with his manic grin. You'll wear it whenever I want. Deal? She gazed at him with startled eyes, badly confused on what to do. Her initial instinct was to drop the soiled jacket and refuse his offer. What would people think if they saw her, a Hyuga, freely wearing blood-stained garments? And what of potential diseases? She wasn't immune to sickness like he was. But on the other hand, this could be the first step in saving him. If I do this, I'll be able to make him happy, and if it makes him happy then he might listen to what I have to say. Swallowing her non-existent pride and fear, she shakily removed her current overcoat, then slowly donned the bloodied coat, wincing at the reason behind the stiffness in the sleeves. Once it was fully on, her arms fell to her sides and she gazed at the blonde who beamed at her with insane happiness. The boy approached her, once again demolishing any notion of personal space. His arms rose and his fingers moved upwards as they caressed her sides before ending at her jawline. Naruto's warm breath graced her pale face as his smile parted and a spot of drool dripped from his lips at the sight. Normally, Hinata would be hyperventilating by now and her eyes would be screaming in fright, but this time was different. The blonde cocked an eyebrow and backed up a bit in an attempt to understand what was missing. "What happened to you? Why aren't you afraid?" "I'm not afraid," she lied. She was truly scared, but this time the strength of her resolve was enough to help her stand fast against her horror and reduce it in the process. That, or she was becoming acclimated to the immortal's uncomfortable advances. "Really?" He frowned, grasped his nearby javelin, and leveled the bladed end at her stomach. Maybe it needs a personal touch. What happened next truly surprised him. The young Hyuga gently grasped the edged weapon at her gut and centered it with her small body. "Would that make you happy, Naruto?" At this point, she was operating on autopilot while her mind was shrieking at her. "What am I doing? I don't want to die." Naruto stared at the preteen for a solid minute as the gears turned in his mind. What happened to his favorite prey? Was she no longer susceptible to the same perfect fear she normally exhibited so well? His eyes widened when Anko's prediction of killing becoming mundane came to mind. Was it happening already? He had only found perfect terror in the Hyuga a short while ago. Was it gone already? That can't be, he denied. Is the best life has to offer already over? A moment later, something snapped in his mind and he retracted the weapon to promptly replace it with a fist grappling Hinata's jacket and yanking her within inches of his face. "What happened to you?" he growled. "You were scared out of your mind when I killed those guards, and you weren't even in danger. But now that I'm threatening your life, you're not terrified like before. Why? Where did it go?" "Naruto," she choked through an onslaught of tears that begged for release, "you're hurting me." His enraged eyes glared into her frightened orbs for an eternity in an attempt to decipher what went through her mind. To be sure, there was fear, but it was no longer pure. Now it mixed with something akin to pain, an obvious byproduct of his harsh grip and what looked to be determination. What could this be? He honestly wondered. Did she come here to appease me? "No, that's not it. She said she wanted to talk, and now she's going along with my suggestions, without resisting. Why did she come here in the first place? Is she really no longer as afraid as before?" "Naruto?" Her genteel voice broke him from his revelry. He sneered and released her before stalking away with heavy steps, his gaze still locked on her as he circled the stationary preteen. "Why are you really here?" His malevolent azure eyes narrowed. Hinata blushed as her resolve faltered and her fingers began their nervous habit. Her apprehensive gaze lowered to the ground as she tried to find the words. "Out with it," the blonde demanded after a few unsatisfactory seconds. "I want to save you," she yelped, buckling under the unseen pressure exuded from the boy. I want to save you," she repeated quietly. Naruto's head shot back and he openly laughed at her. "Save me? What makes you think I need saving?" She retreated into her bloodied overcoat. You aren't the same as before?" His joviality died and he stared at her with confusion? Apathy? Sadness? She couldn't tell, but the change intrigued her. "I'm not the person I used to be. I'm a monster now, and there's no going back for me." "A monster?" "That's right." His grin began replacing itself as he continued, "A monster, a killer, a cold-blooded murderer. I gave up my humanity a long time ago." His eyes widened and his smile accompanied them in a manic smirk. "I am nothing but Lord Jashin's servant now." The Hyuga gazed at him with softened eyes. He was sad for a moment. Her lips parted and she spoke gently. "Naruto, I don't think that's true. I think there is still some kindness in you." His crazed smile melted and was replaced by a cocked eyebrow. This was new. Someone believed in him? As if, the immortal thought. Why? Because I admire why you. He raised his brow in surprise. She admired him? She admired him? What the hell? No one admires me, no one. How could someone like her look up to me of all people? I don't get it. Thoughts of Anko sticking up for him the previous evening flooded his mind, serving to confuse him further. He opened his mouth to speak but was interrupted by another knock at the door. "Oh, what the fuck?" he shouted in annoyance. He was sick and tired of so many damn visitors. Ignoring Hinata's startled gaze, he gathered up his javelin, strode to the door, and swung it open without restraint. He was instantly greeted with a pair of eyes similar to those of the blue-haired girl. "Another Hyuga, eh?" Naruto Uzumaki, the owner of the white eyes, coldly stated, "You are responsible for the slaughter of the guards at the Hyuga mansion yesterday, were you not?" The blonde grinned at the accusation. "You better believe it," he jerked a thumb at his proud face, "and you are." Hinata yelped when she caught a view of the new guest and her hands went for her mouth. Neji," said teen-eyed the girl hatefully. "Hinata, I see you were lying to Lord Hiashi. For that, you shall be punished." "Hey asshole," the Uzumaki grew impatient, "I asked you a question. I believe you overheard my name from my cousin, Naruto." The immortal glared daggers at the arrogant boy. "And you came to me. What do you want?" "On Lord Hiashi's orders, I am to punish you and Hinata for the crimes of murder and conspiracy. And that punishment is..." The older boy released the barest of smirks. "Your actions are punishable by death." Naruto felt his lips widen again. Maybe today wouldn't be so bad after all. Hanabi hid behind a corner while silently observing her elder cousin Neji confront Naruto and her sister. The young Hyuga had noted her sibling rising earlier than usual that morning and followed her on a gut feeling in the hopes of understanding why the shy heiress was defending the person behind her clansman's murders. She was surprised to find Neji approach the door since her fledgling bloodline hadn't noticed the skilled youth. Her abilities were still developing. But to think she was protecting Naruto, she pondered, why would she hide a murderer's identity? Her opal eyes widened upon witnessing Neji burst into the room in an attack. What's going on? She panicked and moved from her position without purpose. One part of her mind urged her to watch the fight while another screamed at her to run. The end result was a young Hyuga squirming back and forth in indecision. She felt a presence land behind her and turned to face it. "A Hyuga, the looming figure curiously stated, "and she's watching Naruto." "Who are you?" she inquired innocently. This person was scary. The intimidating man's smile resembled a certain blonde's. "You don't need to know." Neji. Hinata yelped from her corner. The arrogant boy burst into the room the instant he claimed himself to be her and Naruto's executioner. The skirmish between the immortal and the prodigy took up much of the apartment, and holes were already decorating the walls. "What a great way to start the day," the Uzumaki exclaimed while wildly swinging his javelin. Every attempt to stab the intruder failed miserably at the hands of the gentle fist style. "What is this?" Neji wondered as his strikes cleanly landed. No matter how much chakra went into each jab, the blonde didn't seem to slow. No matter, he cannot use chakra anyway. And so the lethal dance continued. Naruto slashed madly at the arrogant boy to no avail while the Hyuga's harsh palms did nothing. The immortal grasped the spiked end of his weapon and swung the bladed javelin as a sword, digging trenches into his walls as his insane laughter grew with every swing. Neji's attacks were far more accurate, but his rate of success was abysmal. "How are you still moving?" the pale-eyed youth stated as he slapped away the oncoming weapon once again. "Your chakra should have been completely sealed long ago." "I'm just that good," Naruto shouted gleefully as he spun on his heel to bring his blade back again. "I believe you are mistaken," he retorted calmly, "you possess little skill, much like my cousin cowering in the corner." The blonde frowned in mid-swing. "What? You are a failure who must resort to fanaticism in order to survive." He ducked. "You rely on nothing but pure luck." He ducked again. "And this will always be true." He ducked a third time. "You will always be a failure." At this point, Naruto's wild swinging grew into a frenzied barrage. "A failure, huh?" His guttural voice repeated, "Pure luck? Fanaticism?" He raised his weapon over his head and brought it down to stab the Hyuga and instead buried it in the wall. "You son of a bitch." Neji grinned in self-satisfaction. "Your insults only prove your incompetence. I don't give a fuck." The blonde yanked the bladed spear from his wall, jabbed, and missed again while his azure eyes began to shift. The pupils twitched and became flooded with a deep primal crimson, like gentle water flowing down the drain with blood following in its wake. "You arrogant asshole." He threw his arm out to swing the javelin, But the angle would have passed the blade through the subdued Hinata's throat, so his enraged mind sent the message to his limb and he avoided killing the frightened girl by a fraction of an inch. This was not lost on the self-proclaimed genius. He's avoiding Hinata. A smirk grew on his lips as an idea struck him. He spun on his heel, yanked the poor girl from her upright cowering position, and then trapped her arms behind her back and held her in a headlock from behind. All it would take was one jerk of the arm and her small neck would snap like a twig. I find this ironic, one failure protecting another. Naruto's feral eyes screamed hatred. How dare this arrogant prick touch what was his? His enraged mind didn't consider why this was a bad thing. All he knew was that if Hinata was to die, it would be by his own hand on his own time. Let her go, he growled, she's mine. You are in no position to make demands. And neither are you. He aimed his javelin at Hinata's stomach but kept his gaze level with Neji. You kill her, I kill you. Naruto. The younger Hyuga squeaked, her terrified eyes struggling to view the bladed edge held against her. You will not succeed, the arrogant boy stated calmly, twisting his arm a bit and causing Hinata to squirm in his grasp. Her body will slow the blade before it can reach me. The blonde's face broke into a sick smile. Not if you know where to aim. With that, he plunged the weapon straight through both Hyugas in a single motion. He instantly removed the double-edged spear, grabbed Hinata as she fell forward, and jabbed at a stumbling Neji. The pale-eyed boy barely managed to avoid the follow-up attack but crashed into the wall to his back before sliding away and smearing a trail of blood across the apartment. What the hell? I thought he was avoiding Hinata? He willed his Byakugan active and glanced at said girl as she was laid on the Uzumaki's mattress. He avoided any vital points? Naruto gently set the ailing preteen on his bed. Keep pressure here, he pressed her hand over the wound and pushed down. He looked into her eyes as her chest heaved with chaotic breath and noted her fear, but this time he felt preoccupied, like this was no time for reveling in her fright. Good thing I know my anatomy, he commented to the intruder with his trademark manic grin. You, however, are taller, so your wound isn't quite so insignificant. Neji smirked with a wince. This is nothing, he defied the preteen, you merely took advantage of the situation. The immortal rushed at him with the javelin in a wide swing, so he merely stepped aside. But when the enemy slammed into the wall, he frowned when Naruto rotated his head in place, tongue first across the blood smeared on the wall. What are you doing? He cocked an eyebrow. Sealing your fate. With that and a smile, the boy scrubbed the floor with a few heavy droplets of the natural fluid, painting the creaking wooden beams in dark crimson. Soon enough, his legs stopped rotating and planted themselves in the center of the bloody circle. He smirked. Behold the power of Lord Jashin. What are you ga? His left arm erupted in a rosy shower before he could question the blonde's sudden transformation. Naruto merely smiled with wide eyes at the older boy's newfound injuries. Hope you prayed today. He stabbed his leg and sent the Hyuga to a knee. 'Cause you're not leaving this room alive. His arm retrieved the javelin then jabbed it into a lung, prompting him to shiver with the ensuing endorphin rush. When Neji's respective lung collapsed and he gasped for air, the blonde waltzed over to him, unsheathed a handful of kunai, and then nailed him to the wall by the arms. You stay here, the immortal commanded as he took up his choice weapon and made his way to Hinata. He scooped up the wounded girl despite her instinctual protests and strolled for the door, but not before shooting a final glance at the pale-eyed captive. Don't dirty the place up. As the Uzumaki charged from the apartment, a pair of eyes followed the immortal and Hyuga as they departed for a new destination. Naruto, a dark voice mumbled, what are you doing? Let me go, Hanabi whispered, her pain far too extreme to allow for speaking above a hush. Please, Peef, as if. The looming figure hefted its elongated weapon over the shoulder and the young girl followed, since one of the device's blades was wedged between her heart and a lung. I'll finish you off once I figure out why Naruto hasn't killed that other Hyuga. The individual glanced back with a manic grin. That's Mr. Deadman to you, girl. The Konoha hospital bustled with activity, a good or bad sign depending on one's point of view. It was good business for the medical staff. There was now a surplus of work to be done and it filled everyone's time, which translated into higher paychecks. On the other hand, it meant there were far more attacks and deaths occurring in the village. The latter was the prevalent truth. Out of all the separate branches of the facility, The morgue was filling more rapidly than it could process corpses. The stench of death permeated the other wings, and standard autopsies were no longer top priority due to the necessity for space. The hospital staff knew from the influx of mutilated bodies that something was happening in Konoha. There had never been so many murders in such a short time. There were even patterns to the killings. The first influx was obviously from the red light district, seeing as how so many of them were prostitutes and their clients. Even the injuries themselves suggested at least 2 additional perpetrators. There was no longer a single puncture or slash wound in the majority of the corpses. But all that became moot when the overall volume level of the front lobby went up a few notches upon the arrival of a certain blonde. "Yo!" Naruto shouted with the wounded Hyuga in his arms. "Got someone here." He received a few glares in reply and sneered. "Do your damn jobs or I'll do it for you." A few orderlies swallowed their disgust and attended to the boy, relieving him of the blue-haired heiress. One of them stayed back and glared at him as Hinata was taken away. What happened? The blonde felt like splitting the woman's skull in 2 but decided against it. "Dunno," he lied, defiant to the end, "found her like that." His eyes rotated in his skull towards the morgue and he smiled. "There's been a lot of new attacks, right? Probably one of those." The woman grimaced, then followed after the heiress to do her job. She unconsciously knew the dark boy was involved, but she possessed no proof of it, and thus had nothing on him. But that didn't stop her from giving him the evil eye before disappearing from view. Naruto watched after the group for a moment longer with an unsatisfied gaze. He resented the idea that he had to hand over the girl to people he hated, but what choice did he have? Sure, he could have stopped the bleeding and dressed the wound himself. He knew that Hinata's injury wasn't serious, but then what kind of alibi could the shy girl produce that wouldn't incriminate him? Besides all that, Neji was about to go missing. He grinned at that notion and the invisible bubble around him widened a fraction of an inch. Almost forgot about him. His legs swiveled in place and he trudged home with a murderous purpose. But as the boy rapidly strolled through town, Deadman watched him from the shadows with Hanabi still alive and impaled on the weapon strapped over his back. The older immortal's eyes narrowed upon viewing his comrade's actions. Did he just save that Hyuga girl? His mind offered an answer to his inquiry and he sneered. Don't tell me he's gotten attached to her. If he has, I'll have to fix that. The blonde in question arrived home with a foot planted to his door. He made a beeline for an unconscious Neji who hadn't budged from his painful position and smashed a fist into the older boy's gut. The Hyuga awoke with a deep hack and bloody spittle. "You!" Naruto shouted in the captive's face. "You walk into my home and bust it up without thinking about consequences?" Neji looked at him with weary pale eyes. "You are a monster?" This pleased the immortal. His lips split into a sick grin. "Tell me something I don't know." "Now," he continued and his smile evaporated, "who sent you to kill me?" "I will not tell you, Arg." The Uzumaki elicited some more pain by jamming the javelin into his stomach. "I'll gut you like a fish if you don't interest me." The Jashin follower grasped the embedded blade in a manner threatening to slice open Neji's abdomen. "Now, interest me. Who sent you?" Lord Hiyashi. "Good," he nodded with a smile. The pain contorting the Hyuga's face wasn't like Hinata's, but it was fine nonetheless. "Now, why Hinata too? She's a Hyuga." He gasped, "is a failure. She protected your identity, so?" "I was ordered to kill her as well." Once again, Naruto's smirk vanished. "A failure, That's what you think?" Despite the pain, the doomed boy managed a chuckle. "It is not just me. Lord Hiyashi ordered me to." "Who is this Hiyashi?" the blonde demanded, tightening his grip on the embedded weapon. "He is the clan head." Neji gasped for air, and Hinata's father. The immortal's eyes widened as far as they could go. "Her dad?" he pondered in shock. Her own dad ordered this fuck to kill her? His own daughter? His eye twitched. This scenario was familiar. It brought back memories. He recalled his childhood, the days when he couldn't walk the streets at night and suffered the undue hatred of everyone around him. The birthdays where he barely survived the visits of inebriated others. Every single brazen attempt on his life. The Uzumaki leaned closer to the screwed teen's face and whispered, "Lord Jashin will consume your soul. Have fun in hell." With a violent jerk, the boy wrenched the bladed javelin across Neji's belly to expose the innards. A waterfall of blood and intestines gushed to the floor, But those were non-essential organs. The Hyuga was still alive, albeit by a thread. The blonde sneered at the blank eyes, then jammed his arm into the wound. He wormed the limb into the chest cavity, grasped the failing heart, and jerked the living organ from Neji's body. The victim ceased moving and bled out in a matter of seconds. Naruto then turned in place with angry eyes locked onto the heart. "Hiashi, huh?" he murmured. Fires of a rage he hadn't felt in years built in his chest, and his grip tightened until the fragile organ popped in his fist. "Trying to take what's mine, you white-eyed fuck? You're dead." He yanked the weapon from the fresh body, then marched out the door, oblivious to the blood smeared across his shirtless body and the crimson smears his footsteps left behind. It was a pleasant day thus far. Hiashi was calmly seated in one of the many gardens dotting the estate, his thoughts every bit as light as the air. These were incredibly rare moments, and he treasured them dearly. They reminded him of his late wife, the love of his life. Sadly, every time he thought of her he was reminded of his children, and this always soured his mood. He was grateful enough to have at least one competent daughter, but Hinata was a horrific disappointment. He knew for a fact that his heart grew cold after the death of his wife, but he couldn't help how he felt. His wife was strong and gentle all at once, an unusual combination of qualities in any woman. Hinata reminded him very much of her mother, at least in appearance. Her mannerisms were also similar, but not by much. Other than that, the two were nothing alike. Hiashi always scowled whenever Hinata was involved. How could one blessed with so much be so talentless? She possessed his genes as well as her mother's. She should have been strong and courageous. She should have been a budding leader. She should have been the best of the best. But she isn't. She is worthless. It is better that her life be cut short than to extend her misery. A mercy kill, what is that? He paused when sounds of an intruder filled his ears, followed closely by the shouts and screams that usually accompanied warfare. With purpose in his movements, he stood to his feet and swiftly made his way towards the commotion. Branch members rushed to and fro in a panic, some with injuries that would effectively end their shinobi career. After an eternity of minutes, he approached the front garden that adorned the gates to the compound. "What is this?" he demanded, finding bodies and blood smeared everywhere. A certain blonde stabbed through one of the many guards, then regarded the clan head with angry eyes. "You Hiashi?" he inquired over the din of groans emanating from the wounded. "I am," he called back, silently observing the chaotic scene. "I presume you are responsible for yesterday's attack?" "Yeah." Naruto eyed the badly injured victims and began painting the dirt beneath him in the tradition symbol of death. "You're Hinata's dad, right?" Pale eyes narrowed at the mention of their failed daughter. "I am." He cocked an eyebrow when the Uzumaki completed a seal of some kind and then promptly drank the blood oozing from his drenched javelin. "Why do you want to have her killed?" The immortal approached the family head away from the shelter of his murderous mark. "She is a failure and she defended a murderer. For a Hyuga, there is no greater disgrace." "There's where you're wrong, old man." He brandished the weapon and spat blood before the older man's feet. "She is mine, and anything that's mine is perfect." He rushed the white-eyed ninja and struck at him with the javelin. Hiashi easily deflected the attack and retaliated. His palms slammed into the boy dozens of times before relenting, and then he stepped back and fell into position for another move. He didn't expect any, though the boy's main points were sealed without any effort. Naruto stumbled back from the force of the blows and his eyes lit up with unseen fire. He rushed the man again, this time swinging his weapon as a sword. Once again, he was met with a flurry of open palms that itched upon contact. His feet held him in place, and he felt like he should have been enjoying this fight, but he couldn't. He tried to force a madman's smile, but it never lasted. "I see Neji has failed," Hiashi commented as he came forward to deliver the final blow. He dropped into the proper stance and initiated the 8 trigrams heavenly spin technique. His arms delivered the blows like a mighty waterfall, fluidly and brimming with innate power. The boy took the full force of everything. It was like he resigned himself to being beaten to a pulp. Hiashi knew that the final blow would be fatal, and he grimaced in annoyance when he slammed his palm into the Uzumaki's forehead. "This will do it," he concluded. His eyes widened when this wasn't the case. The immortal sneered and glared at the man with eyes that grew in fury. "Is that it? Is that the best the Hyuga can do? Impossible." He fell back and assessed the situation. "I hit every one of his vital points. He should be dead. No, he concluded, it must be the fox keeping him alive. He focused his bloodline eyes on the young murderer and found the highest concentration of chakra. His stomach. That's where the fox is sealed. The blonde stomped the ground during his stride, his heavy footsteps displaying his mounting anger. Neji, you, this whole damn clan. He wielded his sharpened javelin like a mock swordsman. You're all so fucking arrogant. I'll kill all of you. Women, children, every last one of them. Hiyashi frowned for but a moment. The Uzumaki wanted to kill the Hyuga but keep Hinata alive. He attributed this contradiction to the rage he felt before him, and he prepared a special seal in his hands for the fox. This seal is ancient, passed down through generations. To think its first use in hundreds of years will be against the demon boy. He charged forward with fingers prepared to mutilate the seal that kept the fox in check. The blonde killer noted the Hyuga's advance but made no effort to dodge. He took the brunt head-on and felt a bizarre tingling on his stomach. It was immediately followed by a sharp jolt of pain, but he brushed it off and reached for the man's arm with the intent of removing it from the body. Hiyashi leapt back and frowned. He couldn't determine if the ancient family seal worked. This irritated him greatly. Have I done it? Is the fox separated from the boy? He didn't have time to consider this further. A claw grasping his wrist suddenly burned his flesh to ashes and he winced at the sudden pain. Naruto cocked an eyebrow. His extended arm was covered in chakra? He had never seen anything like it before. It covered the appendage and bubbled like crimson water. Furthermore, it extended farther than his own arm and held the older Hyuga in place like an iron vice. That's different, was all he had to say before yanking his arm back. The ethereal limb imitated the motion and Hiyashi was jerked towards him. The boy quickly slashed at the man with his weapon, and it didn't even stir his pleasure when the clan head didn't avoid enough of the attack. The arrogant man fell back once again and ran a finger over the shallow wound on his side. You possess great luck, he stated coldly, but that will not last forever. Fuck you, the blonde replied before licking the tainted weapon. Hiyashi's blood was filtered into his system and he ran back to his murderous seal. He turned in time to find the older man following. Apparently, that seal caught the enemy's attention. His flesh instantly reacted and morphed in time for the Hyuga to slam a palm into his stomach once again. He spat blood but cracked a grin when his attacker did the same. What is this? The pale-eyed leader couldn't believe it. It was as if he slammed a jukin into his own gut. What trickery is this? Divine punishment, he announced before barraging his right leg with the javelin. His lips parted in an angry smirk when the opponent fell to the ground, his own leg bleeding with identical injuries. Naruto then attacked his other leg and followed it up by piercing his arms along random intervals. The Hyugas who were previously wounded wailed and died in agony. The immortal had ingested their blood earlier in lieu of a mass simultaneous slaughter. The blonde strode from the safety of Jashin's gifted seal and approached the prone man. He reached down, pulled the man's head back by the hair, and brought his face within inches of Hiyashi's. Lord Jashin will consume your soul as well. Say hi to Neji for me. The defeated man's eyes widened when he realized that the end was nigh. Why you, monster? You asked for one. He released him and walked back to the deathly seal, and you got one. For Lord Jashin. With that, he jabbed the sharpened steel rod through his heart and shuddered at the endorphin release. Everyone not already dead lurched forward, gave one final shriek, and then passed away with a gurgle, leaving Naruto standing amidst a garden of bloody flowers and gory stones. His bare chest heaved as his breath calmed. His anger at the arrogance of the Hyuga had subsided with said man's death, and he felt no particular joy in this killing. Damn it, was Anko right? Is this already getting old? Yo! A cheery voice interrupted his negative revelry. The Uzumaki turned to find Asha sitting atop the blood-stained outer wall. What do you want? Is that any way to greet someone who's about to tell you something? She giggled in that alluring way she did. The blonde's eyes narrowed. What is it? Ah, now should I tell you or not? She hobbled to her feet and began walking along the wall's edge. You never give me anything in return. You can have the Hyuga family. She stopped and considered. Really? She cooed. Even that cute little one in the hospital? His eyes narrowed. She's mine. Don't touch her. Asha shrugged and commented further with a smile. And you say you don't have any attachments? Don't touch her. She's mine. Fine, fine. She held up her palms. I'll take your offer. What were you going to tell me? He knew it couldn't be good, and normally he wouldn't have cared. But something in the way the temptress said it. Deadman's visiting the hospital right now. Seems he saw you and, your, Hyuga hey. She yelped in surprise when Naruto took off without a word. Ooh, a heresy I smell. You, a voice broke her from her musings. The courtyard was filling with guards. Come down from there. Ooh, she cooed at the sight of so many men and women. They're all so young, thank you, Naruto. The blonde Jashin follower couldn't believe it. After everything he went through with Neji, was his source of perfect terror to die at the hands of a fellow immortal? Dead man, if you touch a single hair on her, I'll kill you. It struck him as odd that he didn't want Hinata to die so soon. She's mine to kill, he assured himself, not his. His legs pummeled the ground and he sailed through the streets, ignoring the shocked glares of those who noticed his gashed and bloody torso. Crimson liquid soaked into the earth with every footstep and arced into the air with grotesque grace as it flowed off his body like so many droplets of rain. Naruto. A familiar voice sounded off from behind him, what happened to you? He averted his eyes to find Anko running alongside him and wondered why worry was plastered across her features. Doesn't matter. Gotta get to the hospital. Naruto. She swung around to his front and stopped him in his tracks with outstretched arms against his shoulders. What happened? Why are you wounded? Hyugas, he sneered, now get out of my way. I gotta get to the hospital. Why? Her voice toned down. The blonde's left eye twitched in annoyance, but then he noted that the Mitarashi didn't appear angry. Rather, she looked worried? Concerned? I gotta get Hinata out of there, he replied slowly, attempting to stem his temper, she's about to die. The snake charmer eyed him for a moment. Hinata Hyuga? She's gonna die? Is he gonna kill her? She read the look he gave her and decided otherwise. No, he's concerned. He's going to save her. She shot him a bright smile and released him. Then let's go. He wondered about the sudden change in temperament, but decided that it wasn't important. Stay out of my way if you don't want to die. This was a major disappointment. Didn't Konoha have any worthwhile ninjas? Better yet, why was their place of healing so poorly guarded? The many halls of the establishment were smeared with blood and gore, and the fresh mutilated corpses of people from all walks of life littered the floors on every level below the target room, wherever that may be. I haven't had things so easy in years. He felt a squirming in his free arm and glanced down in irritation. Quit it, or I'll kill you right now. Please, help me? Hanabi gasped for air. She was losing blood, but not enough to put her in shock or die anytime soon. But that didn't mean the pain wasn't immense. Shut up. He knocked her head against the wall and rendered her unconscious. And don't die yet. I feel like killing 2 Hyugas at once. He continued on his way, tossing his bizarre weapon around 2 ninjas who burst from a room behind him in a poorly executed flanking maneuver. The many scythe blades dug into their skin and tore them apart upon the jerk of the steel cord. Weak, he smirked, but Lord Jashin is pleased. The murderous immortal went through every room he could find. Most were occupied by patients suffering from a variety of illnesses, fever, strep throat, cancer, recent battle wounds, and many more. But it didn't matter in his eyes, they all died as easily as the last. It wasn't difficult by any stretch of the imagination. All it took was a few whips of the arm from the doorway and the attached rope of curved blades did the rest. He continued on the killing spree and scaled another floor, decapitating a handful of ninjas and the orderlies who got caught in the crossfire with a boisterous smile. Today's a good day. He approached the first door on the new floor, kicked it in with his usual bravado, and grew a smile. He found his target. Before him lied a sleeping Hyuga only a few years older than the one in his hand. Bandages were strapped around her abdomen, evidence of a wound that, in all honesty, didn't appear life-threatening. Hell, she could probably treat it at home. Looks like that ain't gonna happen now, though. He lifted Hanabi onto the bed and unceremoniously set her down, awakening the snoozing patient in doing so. Hinata blinked the drug-induced blurriness from her sleepy eyes and took in the sight before her. There was a bloodied stranger who towered over her with a strange weapon that trailed behind him alongside a river of blood. And who was that on her bed? Hanabi. She reached for the younger sibling and gasped when she found the gaping wound. What happened? Things finally clicked in her mind and she realized what this newcomer had come to do. She slowly turned her head to meet the stranger with fearful tears welling up in her eyes. No, he smiled. Looks like you figured it out. Rest assured, Lord Jashin will enjoy your souls. Having said that, he flung his arm upward and the multi-bladed weapon followed the momentum towards the Hyuga sisters. But a familiar javelin plowed through the immortal's heart and his steel cord jerked to a halt and became taut. Deadman glanced down, sneered when he recognized the weapon, and turned in place to find the Uzumaki holding back his device of death. Naruto, what are you doing? The boy regarded him with a spiteful stare. She's mine, he calmly stated, leave her be. Deadman's manic eyes widened and he sneered. Heresy, he said, you've grown attached to this girl. I have to kill her to bring you back to Jashin, or kill you for your atonement. Think you can do that? For the second time that day he felt a special rage build in his chest, but this time he felt powerful. There was a warm sensation swirling in his stomach, and something told him that he could reach out and touch his enemy. He leapt at Deadman, reaching for his javelin in midair. Said hostile yanked back on his flexible weapon and extracted the bladed pull from his chest simultaneously. Now that the blonde immortal was in the air, there was no escape. He angled the bladed edge of the javelin so as to take off Naruto's head and swung once he was in range. A maniacal smile found its way onto his lips, but something new happened and they contorted into a grimace. What the fuck? No sooner had Deadman cursed than a limb of chakra extended from the blonde boy's arm and slammed into him. The force was powerful enough to knock the javelin from his hand and throw him right through the large window pane. Since the lever to his weapon was woven over his hand, his rapidly descending body took the connected scythe blades with it. He crashed onto the sidewalk several floors below, then collected himself and retreated within seconds of landing. He can use chakra? How is that possible? How? Naruto himself didn't understand it. He stared at his arm and the bubbling crimson energy in wonder. He had never seen this before today. What is this? He inquired aloud. Is it the fox? Naruto. Anko finally arrived on the scene. She couldn't believe how fast the immortal was. Are you okay? He didn't immediately reply. He was entranced by the warm energy as it receded into his body and dissipated. I'll live, he stated lifelessly before turning his gaze to Hinata. His lips broke into a smile. She was quivering in fear, that perfect terror that only she could exhibit. Naruto, she cried, flinging herself from the bloodied bed and wrapping frightened arms around the blonde. She winced at her injury, but her adrenaline levels kept her from feeling the full shock of it so far. IIW was so scared. Her pale eyes screwed shut, but tears made their way through anyway. Her head felt light, and she wasn't fully conscious of the world around her thanks to the sedatives running through her system. She backed away with a heavy blush and absent-mindedly noted the wounds scarring the boy. Why, you're hurt? I'll live, the Uzumaki repeated. His voice was detached. He had never felt such a display of affection. Granted, he never received much physical contact that could possibly carry a hint of tenderness, but that didn't stop him from wondering why she did what she did. His smile transformed into a grin as he noticed that his blood transferred to her gown during the embrace, and he let his mild pleasure be known by painting her cheek with a crimson thumb. He gazed into her eyes and frowned in confusion when she no longer regarded him with fear. Must be the drugs, he figured. There was no way she could be warming up to his treatment of her, right? Anko couldn't help but give a silent chuckle to this situation. Here they were, surrounded by blood and gore and death, and all these two could think about was each other. Never mind that the bleeding Hyuga girl still on the bed was beginning to stir. Oh, shit, she finally realized what had to be done. I gotta get a doctor. Shit, are there any left? Deadman stumbled through the back alleys he used to get to the hospital in the first place, unable to comprehend why Naruto could utilize chakra. Our chakra is sacrificed to Lord Jashin for his gifts, he knew, so why does that brat still have some? Where did it come from? He continued on his frantic retreat until he detected the scent of blood emanating from the east. Following his nose, he found the Hyuga complex and entered to be greeted by oceans of blood and the incessant sounds of Asha enjoyably violating victims within the compound walls before finishing them off. He trudged over to the Moans and found her in a room lined with bound and amputated Hyuga members awaiting their deaths like cattle. He eyed Asha without a shred of patience, threw his weapon forward, and carved her current victim to death in an instant. Hey, her head swung to the side, flinging beads of sweat everywhere. What the fuck? I wasn't done with her yet. We need to talk. He coughed. That fall hurt. It's about Naruto. She cocked an eyebrow. What about him? She spat, still irritated that her session had been interrupted. He can use chakra. The female immortal froze for a moment. Is there something in my ears? Did I hear you right? He nodded and she repeated his claim. He can use chakra? Yeah, her face scrunched up in confusion. Huh? How? I don't know. I thought you might. She shrugged. I dunno. Maybe he's got a blood limit we didn't know about. He grimaced. Could that have been it? No bloodlines still required chakra to activate. He was using chakra all on its own. Once again, she shrugged. That's interesting, but I don't see how that's a problem. Can I get back to this? She waved a hand at her gagged concubines. Deadman stomped away. Of course she's only interested in fucking. I've gotta let the clergy know about this. The day of death passed, bringing with it anguish and anger amongst Konoha's population. The Hyuga clan had all but been eradicated. Many of the few survivors were scarred for life. They were now destined to wait out their days in clean padded rooms screaming about a witch with turquoise hair. They couldn't be helped, not anymore. The hospital massacre also hit everyone hard. The eventual number of casualties in the place of healing came out to 58 people, and many of them were patients who wouldn't have been able to defend themselves with a tripwire bomb. People were understandably angry, and they were out for blood. Specifically, they were out for the Uzumaki, seeing as how he was the one running to and fro in broad daylight while covered in blood. It was this reason that the blonde now stood before Sarutobi in the Hokage Tower. Said immortal didn't appear concerned in the least. His eyes carried a lackadaisical quality as he regarded the old man, and he wished to get this over with as quickly as possible. He was mildly irritated that his unique weapon had been confiscated at the door by force, but what could he do? Besides, the Hokage was one of the only people he viewed as worthy of living. That alone pronounced his due respect. Naruto, the aged ninja, began with a grave tone. Do you know why you're here? Yep, he casually replied. Sarutobi sighed. The boy had always been difficult to deal with, especially after his conversion. Naruto knew he didn't have to answer to anyone, so he was at least thankful that the blonde killer listened to him at all. Naruto, were you responsible for the attack on the Hyuga clan and the hospital? The hospital was a rhetorical question. Anko already informed him of the boy's innocence in that bloodbath. Not the hospital. I killed a few Hyugas, but not the whole clan. At least he's honest. He pried further. How many of the Hyugas did you kill? He scratched his temple in thought. A few guards. Hiyashi, he paused. Oh, Neji's still nailed to my wall. Crap, now the place'll stink forever. The elder shinobi's eyes narrowed. You killed the clan head? It was nothing short of a miracle that his voice remained calm. He wanted to express his frustration over Naruto's actions but knew it would fall on deaf ears. Yeah, Neji invaded my home so I defended myself, and the guards attacked me before I got near Hiyashi. This interested the old man. Did you provoke anyone? Neji, no. The guards, well, I was trespassing, but they used lethal force. The irony stung the air. I came to kill Hiyashi, though. And I did. He grinned wide at the pleasant memory. Why? His smile grew ear to ear. Kazi sent Neji to kill me and Hinata. Stop. He hadn't heard about this. He sent Neji to assassinate you and his own daughter? Yeah. Sarutobi sat back in his chair. This is getting complicated. He said nothing for a moment as he considered his next course of action. Naruto, he sullenly addressed the Jashin follower. I know you've had a hard life. Here we go, and I know I haven't done nearly enough for you. Damn straight. But I have to punish you for this. His azure eyes flat-lined. Why? Naruto, if you weren't responsible for any of the killings, I could let you go. But the fact is, you were. Even if it was somewhat justified, you still murdered a member of this village in cold blood. Now, your punishment won't be nearly as much as it would have been if you were responsible for everything, but if I let you go then my authority wouldn't mean much to anyone. Everyone already thinks you're responsible, and they expect retribution. Then bring him on. He pumped a victorious fist to the air. He sighed. Maybe you don't understand. My authority keeps people from attacking you wholesale. If that suddenly goes away, then you will have to potentially face everyone in Konoha. And I know that even the followers of Jashin have their limits. Naruto frowned. When did I tell him I worship Lord Jashin? And do you really want to kill everyone in Konoha? Anko also told him that the Uzumaki rushed to the hospital to save a certain Hyuga. Hopefully, this would be the turning point in the blonde's life, but he could only hope. The boy scowled. Fine, he accepted. What's my punishment? That's a tough one. Normally, the punishment for murder is either death or banishment. Since your situation is unique, I'll have to reprimand you accordingly. He sat in silence, racking his brain for something appropriate. Exiling the boy would only serve to create animosity between Naruto and the world, and killing him was impossible, so what was left? How about a mission? What? He hadn't considered this. You can't be serious? I am, he nodded. Make me work for free. Give me some suicide missions. He offered that disturbing smirk of his. I'll be able to complete them, no problem. Sarutobi cocked his head and thought. Well, can't argue with that logic. Let's see what I have. He rifled through a few files in his desk, the S-class missions, and pulled a few from the hefty stack. Opening the first, he nodded in satisfaction. Start on this one. The immortal took the file and gave it a once-over. It was an assassination request from a local feudal lord. Apparently, there was a rogue group of ninjas that raided several convoys and stole something that pissed off someone high up on the political food chain. Any support? He inquired hopefully. None. You're on your own. This will be the first of many assignments you'll conduct for free. His lips cracked into a smile. Just me? Good. He had been meaning to take a pilgrimage. What better time than now to begin? He turned to waltz out of the room when Sarutobi stopped him. Naruto, he added, do you know who's responsible for the murders? He glanced back. Two assholes called Asha and Deadman. Do they also follow Jashin? Yeah. Do you know where they are? His head shook. Not a clue. He headed for the door again. Asha will do what I tell her, but Deadman's another story. Keep an eye out for him. Kill him if you get the chance. With that and a grin, he exited the room and left the aged ninja to his thoughts. Said shinobi shuddered. Naruto wasn't especially bloodthirsty despite his religion, so his suggestion to kill this dead man on sight could only mean that this immortal was dangerous beyond measure. Naruto arrived at his apartment and promptly released Neji from the wall. The cold corpse slumped to the ground and the blonde made a half-hearted attempt to wash the blood from the room. He partially succeeded, then proceeded to toss the dead teen out the door before packing. He knew that very little was required for this mission. Only a few kunai and throwing stars would accompany his sharpened javelin. Alright, he mumbled to no one, couple more things to do. He locked his place up, stepped over the Hyuga's corpse and made his way to one of the makeshift hospitals dotting the village. The surviving patients were transferred to multiple locations that could easily operate as a hospital since paranoia dictated that the perpetrator would return to the scene of the crime. The blonde scoffed at this logic, knowing that those who worshipped Jashin were as aimless in their sacrifices as the leaves that blew in the wind. He found the place he was looking for and proceeded to push aside the frightened doctors and orderlies in the search for his target. Eventually, he found her lying peacefully in one of the small beds. His approach didn't wake her, but his unnerving gaze did. Hinata instinctually felt a presence near her and stirred. She blinked wildly upon finding the blonde boy standing next to her. Naruto. She squeaked. What are you doing here? His expression remained dead. I got a mission. Don't know how long it'll take. Once you're out of here, find Anko and stick with her. What about Hanabi? Her sister had barely survived her time with Deadman. It was a wonder that the younger girl was even alive. He shrugged. I don't care, do what you want. Stick with Anko though, got it? She stared and nodded at him in puzzlement. Were her ears deceiving her? Was this murderous boy concerned for her well-being? I will. His manic grin returned. Good. He leaned forward, practically raping her personal space as he lowered his lips to her ear. Smirk notwithstanding, he whispered, you will stay alive. After all, you are mine. The Hyuga blushed profusely. I'm his? He wants me? The logical portion of her brain knew that he implied nothing romantic in this statement. He had made it abundantly clear that he treasured her fear and little more. But still, she could dream. Before she could reply, the immortal turned and left without another word. One more stop, he knew. Sadly, he didn't know for sure where to find his next quarry, but he had a good idea. He swiftly waltzed into the red light district and searched out an empty brothel. Finding one rather quickly, he followed the sounds of ecstasy and walked in on Asha before she could finish. Asha, listen up. 1 second. She impaled the unfortunate soul with her spiraling sword upon the interruption, then arched her back as she climaxed. Soon enough, she was in the mood to talk. "What's up?" Naruto averted his eyes. He wasn't really interested in, especially not Ash's version of it, but he still found her lack of inhibitions embarrassing. "I need a favor." Oh? This intrigued her. Naruto never requested anything of her, he demanded them. Maybe now she could make demands of her own? And it is. Keep dead man away from Hinata. He could feel an unconscious blush creeping onto his cheeks as the voluptuous and nude Asha approached him. "And what'll I get in return?" she cooed, draping an arm around his shoulders and twirling her finger around his chest. He grimaced and tried painfully hard to ignore her. "I'll bring someone back for you." "Ah," she pouted, "you know that's not what I want. I'm up against an S-class rogue ninja and his group. I'll keep a strong one alive and bring him back for you." "Come on," she whispered into his ear, practically licking the skin due to her proximity. "You could just pay me right now and get it out of the way. You know, 2 immortals, a few hours in the afternoon?" He glared at her. "I'll bring someone back." He disliked her advances, they drove him nuts. She released him and sighed. "Fine," she shrugged, "but he better be durable. I'm tired of all the weaklings I've been getting lately." "Good." With that, he turned on his heel to leave. "Who you going after?" She didn't honestly care, but her curiosity got the better of her. Maybe it was someone she'd heard of. He didn't break pace to answer her cordially. "Someone named Zabuza Momochi." As the days melted into a week, Naruto continued his trudging search for Zabuza Momochi. It wasn't wildly difficult to find the man in terms of hearsay if one knew where to look. The blonde immortal figured that a missing ninja would be in dire need of work, and the only people who generally hired rogue shinobi tended to be of the shady variety. "This is right up my alley." With this in mind, he proceeded to terrorize local gangs and mobs in the seedy districts of cities to obtain answers. He began his bloody search in the small towns. This was difficult simply because of the small-time nature of crimes that went on in places like these, but eventually he began compiling a list of the big names in the large metropolitan areas. From there, he traveled to the capital in search of these key bosses. He proceeded to go down the list upon arrival, eliminating those who stood in his way. It had been exactly 7 days since he began his journey as he entered a lush mansion whose location was given away by a local businessman. "I'm sure Lord Jashin enjoyed that one," he mused happily, having slaughtered the man once he divulged everything relevant. Apparently, this not-so-humble abode belonged to one of the biggest names in the criminal underworld, Gato. The man dealt mostly in smuggling, but any black market trade provided big payoffs these days. Time to see what he knows. The blonde strolled up the winding cobblestone path to the inner gates and casually noted the professional guards standing watch. "Yo," he greeted miserly, "is this Gato's house?" They eyed him with mounting suspicion. This boy reeked of blood. "What is your business here?" The one with fading blue hair inquired. "This is private property." "Just answer the damn question." His hand groped the bladed javelin as he spoke. He wasn't in the mood to mess around. Neither were the guards. Their spears were instantly leveled at his face. "Get out of here, kid," an auburn-eyed man spat. "Master Gato's not scheduled to see anyone today." He penciled in. He pulled his odd weapon from its silky sheath. "Now let me pass." Gato sat at his desk while reviewing documents in his comfy chair. Official work was in his hands at the moment, but he and countless others knew that much of his business was merely a front. But he was good at cover-ups, so no one crime could ever be tied to him. "All I have to do is eliminate this, Tazuna, and the wave country will be under my thumb. That island would provide major ports for trafficking and, if done correctly, would be a major stepping stone to his illegal career. Once I monopolize the drug trade here in the east, I'll move on to the north. Those barbarians wouldn't know a fair deal if it spit on them." A knock emanated from the door and broke him from his greedy revelry. "Who is it?" he spat, annoyed that someone saw fit to disturb him. The door opened and a blond boy waltzed in like he owned the place. He briefly scanned the room with lazy eyes and stated, "Guess this is the end of the house." "You Gato?" Said short man stood from his seat, subconsciously aware that his stature probably didn't intimidate the boy one bit. "You realize you're trespassing, right? Get out." He aimed a finger at the door. "What the hell are the guards doing?" "Guess that's a yes." Naruto wasn't amused. He had been forced to butcher every guard foolish enough to confront him, and this was on top of traveling non-stop for a week. He was in no mood for games. Now, he brought his odd weapon to bear. Do you know anything about a missing ninja named Zabuza? Kid, get the hell out of here. He tossed an ashtray at the Uzumaki and blinked in surprise when the boy didn't budge. Rather, the heavy glass object smashed into the intruder's forehead without consequence. Guards, what the hell are you doing? That statement made the immortal realize that this man had no idea what kind of danger stood before him, so he swung his bladed javelin back, hooked the edge of the other door, and swung it open. The preceding hallway was drenched with blood and bodies that had been dismembered mostly for intimidation. A lot of your guards are cowards, he stated calmly. You show him a few bodies and they take off. Now, he wielded his weapon against the short businessman. Zabuza? Gato's eyes widened when the full gravity of the situation fell upon him. The guards, they're all dead. And this kid did all that? He unconsciously backed up when the blonde casually advanced on him until his back touched the wall. Please, his voice cracked when the immortal approached. What do you want? Is it money? Power? Could it be women? Naruto buried the bladed end of his elongated tool into the wall next to Gato's head and glared at him. Have you ever heard of a man named Zabuza? Depending on your answer, I might not kill you. His voice dripped with malice and his tone was lined with frustration. He wanted to get on with his free mission so badly that the diminutive crook's fear didn't even register. Of course, the blonde had already had a taste of perfect terror from a certain Hyuga. Zabuza? Oh, him. He recalled the oversized sword of the masked ninja. He's in the W-Wave country. Gato almost revealed the mission he gave to said shinobi, but the horror in his mind screamed at him to withhold it. This freak of nature might not want to hear that. Of course, the immortal didn't care either way. Is that the truth? Gato nodded swiftly. Sweat poured from every orifice in his body and soaked his clothing. The blonde's eyes narrowed. He wanted to make sure this short wuss wasn't lying. He retracted his weapon, flipped it to the ground, and promptly separated the captive's pinky toe from the rest of the foot. Gato squealed at the sudden sharp pain but couldn't move when the Uzumaki clenched his throat with an iron grip. Are you lying? 'Cause if you are, I'll take off your whole leg next. The treacherous businessman chocked and attempted in vain to pry the boy's fingers from his throat. Milliseconds later, he found that this wouldn't happen anytime soon and nodded in affirmation. The foreign digits were removed and he gasped for air. So that's the truth? He's in the wave country? Yes. He coughed and stumbled away. Yes, he is. Please spare me. For the first time in days, Naruto cracked his deathly smile. Good. We have an understanding. He strolled for the door but stopped short. Don't send anyone after me, he threatened. Gato nodded in obedience. This seemed to satisfy the boy and he turned to leave for good. But then his feet halted again. You know, he began, not facing the crooked businessman this time. Why am I bossing you around? He cocked an eyebrow. Wah! Before the short man could finish, the immortal spun on his heel and chucked his javelin at him. The spiked pole sailed straight through the diminutive criminal and stuck him to the wall. Gato feebly grasped the weapon protruding from his chest in his last moments before death took hold and he went limp. The blonde waltzed toward the fresh corpse, yanked free his tool of death, and then fiddled through the slumped body's pockets. Producing a wallet, the boy checked for cash and took it without a smile before exiting the chamber. This is for making me come all the way out here. Old bastard. While Naruto was away from Konoha, Hinata recovered enough from the minor injury he inflicted on her to be released from the field hospital. Hanabi was another story, though Deadman had done a number on her. The older Hyuga wept for her sibling when the doctors told her that the youngest surviving clan member would never be a shinobi. It was simply beyond what her body could do. Even her lifespan was debatable at this point, with all the risks of thinned arteries bursting and internal wounds on vital organs reopening due to stress. I swear I'll keep you safe, Hanabi, Hinata vowed to herself. I'll protect you. She stopped and found this train of thought rather strange. Didn't Naruto say something to that effect? Her cheeks reddened every time she recounted the last moment she shared with the blonde, him leaning into her ear and whispering that she was his. Maybe he's beginning to see me differently? But any happiness derived from the immortal's amorphous words died when news of her family reached her ears. The moment the aged Hokage told her, she felt a weight drop on her shoulders. There was no home for her anymore, but then a tiny, seemingly insignificant fact dawned on her in her misery. The pale eyes of her father would no longer gaze at her with the pure hatred that held her down. As she wandered the streets afterward, she felt horrible that she could harbor such selfish emotions towards her murdered kin. I shouldn't think that way, it's disgraceful. What would father say about it? A thought struck her. But father is no longer alive. It finally hit her, she was free. Free from the struggle between main and branch members, free from the undue prejudice of Neji, free from her father. See, could it be, this is what Naruto intended? That notion was hard to swallow. Could the blonde care for her well-being on a level that he was actually willing to kill for her? That idea left her in a daze. She stalked the streets aimlessly until noticing that the sun was bidding the sky farewell. Instinctively, she started towards the Hyuga compound before stopping short. That's right, Naruto said to find Anko. A certain Mitarashi sneezed before she could take another sip of her sake. Damn, hope it's not a cold. She had spent the last few days worried as hell she hadn't seen Naruto. After the Hyuga slaughter, the blonde simply disappeared without a trace. Interestingly enough, the local murders that had been tantamount as of late had also decreased a significant amount, and the word on the streets was that the demon was finally exiled. I hope that's not the case, she wished. I know he just wants acceptance, even if he won't admit it. Time passed and so did the bottles of booze. On her fifth one, her face accurately resembled a tomato and she couldn't really taste the sour liquid anymore. She was simply slamming the bitter stuff down without thinking. She had no missions planned for a few days, so she could afford to be intoxicated out of her mind for tonight. In mid-sip though, a genteel knock came from her door. Woo isss it, she slurred. Damn it, I can't talk anymore. Hearing an answer but not coordinated enough to understand it, she stood to her feet and swaggered over to the door, bumping into tables and chairs and all the other crap that happened to be in the way. Her hand found the right doorknob on the second attempt and she swung open the wooden barricade. Who? Hinata was instantly assaulted by the stench of alcohol. Au Anko Mitarashi? Huskin, I'm sorry? She blanched. Sri. Woo's askin. The snake charmer eyed the girl, squinting in suspicion as well as to get rid of the other three identical preteen girls. Hyu, ga? They dead. Her head hung in a sudden bout of sleepiness. Yep, I'm hammered. The young Hyuga stammered for a moment. She didn't know what to say. After all, how does one explain to a wasted ninja that they should stay with them because an immortal murderer said so? The drunken woman swayed for a minute longer and began to scoot the door shut. If y'all ain't gonna talk, I'm hidden hey. Hinata's pale eyes widened in the sudden realization that the snake mistress was about to leave her out in the cold. Naruto said I should stay with Yu. She yelped, hoping that the intoxicated shinobi would at least sympathize with her. But why would she? Why would Naruto send me to her? Thankfully, Anko heard the blonde's name and flung the door again. It crashed into the adjacent wall and she stared wide-eyed at the young genin. Naruto? He's alive? She wondered if her drunkenness was playing tricks on her. Get in here. Before she could think, her arm grabbed the girl's loose jacket and pulled her in. The young Hyuga stumbled into the outer room and, after determining that the woman wasn't out for blood, hesitantly made her way towards the living room. Curiosity notwithstanding, she noticed that the Mitarashi's home wasn't exactly posh, not that many apartments were, seeing as how until now she had always resided within a mansion. It reminds me of Naruto's home, she observed, at least, without all the blood. Sit down, the dango lover announced, temporarily forgetting the strength of her vocal cords. Hinata squirmed. I am sorry. The snake mistress grunted as she plopped down on her lone couch and slapped the cushion next to her. Take a seat, she slurred, her words not coming out the way she wanted. The pale-eyed girl obeyed. She was already nervous. At least with Naruto, she could tell what he wanted for the most part. But Anko was an unfamiliar character to her. You said in Naruto-sen, ya? The Mitarashi rolled her head at her guest. Yes? Is he alive? The Hyuga paused for a moment and analyzed her benefactor's eyes. Is she concerned about him? She was never really as adept at reading people like her father or Neji. Why yes. I saw him a few days ago at the hospital. He say, Nathan? She found it odd that she was beginning to understand the drunken speech. He said he had a mission. Anko leaned forward, unaware that her breath was the reason her visitor cringed. He say, all along? Hinata's head ducked and she slowly shook it. He didn't know. A few tense seconds passed and the sweets lover breathed a scented sigh of relief. Ah, least he's safe, N. The pale-eyed girl gazed at the drunken woman. She's smiling? Does she trust Naruto? This alone was a rarity in the village, but she knew it had to go further. No, could she, like Naruto? Her eyes widened. This notion was horrific to her feeble mind. The Mitarashi didn't look at the girl as she dozed. So, Naruto said you stick wi me? Receiving the barest of nods in return, she continued. Well, you see and stay long y'all like. She leaned her head back on the couch and shut her eyes. The Hyugas stared at the woman with inquisitive eyes. What's her relationship with Naruto? She seems worried about him. Is it possible that she likes him? No, that can't be it. She's so much older than him. But, still, she opened her mouth to ask but was interrupted by a soft snore. The Mitarashi had finally succumbed to inebriated slumber. She glanced down in defeat. I'll ask her tomorrow. But despite her resolve, she couldn't help but feel that there was now competition for the young immortal's affection, assuming he had any left to give. Naruto was getting close, he could feel it. 2 days of solid traveling brought him close enough to the wave country that he would have a chance to find Zabuza. But now that he was here, he had no more leads. This was a seriously backwater country, so no crime syndicates were around to provide answers. There were also no shinobi native to the area, so he couldn't even ask around. Well, he halted in the middle of the road. This fucking blows. Coming up with nothing better, he decided to grace the small island with his presence. Maybe wandering around this destitute town would reveal something. With this in mind, he found a small boat probably owned by a fisherman and pushed off towards the island. In due time, the rickety craft finally creaked and rattled its way onto the shores of the self-contained prefecture, and the blonde stepped onto the sand with bored eyes glaring straight ahead. This place stinks, was the first thing to come to mind. It was true, it smelled like fish. He stumbled around for a bit and eventually arrived in the poor village. Figuring that he had found the main road, he briefly wondered if that was truly the case. Any vendors that were even open were selling so little that it was pathetic. He whistled. Man, talk about dirt poor. A thought struck him, and for the second time on this journey, he smiled. I wonder if Lord Jashin would object to such poor sacrifices. A soft tug broke him from his murderous contemplations and he glared in the direction of the disturbance. Some young kid stood uncomfortably close while avoiding eye contact, behavior usually accompanying someone guilty of a crime. The blonde's eyes narrowed and he spied his stolen wallet in the boy's hand. He reacted instantly, capturing the child's arm by the wrist and restraining him in the middle of the dusty street. Let me go, the kid yelled, hoping that he could still get away with his infraction. The Uzumaki simply stared death into the boy's eyes and held out his free hand. Give it back. Gee, give what back? Why the obstinate little? Naruto's patience dried up instantly and he jerked his arm to the satisfying crack of the boy's wrist. Screams followed the motion, only adding to the symphony. I'll ask one more time, hand it over. Tears flowing down his cheeks, the kid shakily returned the doubly stolen property. Upon doing so he was freed, and he wisely took the opportunity to escape with his broken extremity cradled against his body. The immortal pocketed his loot and noted the glares shot towards him. Many were angry, but there were just as many that were nothing more than noteworthy and a few that looked like they couldn't care less. The inhabitants of this country were simply so poor that they found no excitement or irritability in blatant acts of hostility. At least, most people felt that way. Hey! A voice wailed behind the boy, you. What did you do to my son? The Uzumaki turned in place and eyed the insolent one who called him on his aggression, finding it to be a woman with the injured boy cowering behind her. What do you want? She eyed him angrily. You broke my son's wrist, and you expect to get away with it? He glanced at the sky and nodded in consideration. Yeah, pretty much. The woman fumed and stomped towards him, ignoring the cries of those concerned about what was about to go down. The townspeople were astute. They knew trouble when they saw it. Tsunami, please, don't do anything rash. Think of Tazuna, think of Inari. She was foolish enough not to heed their words. Now you listen to me, you damn brat. She handled the lining of the immortal's ebony robe. Just because we're poor doesn't mean we don't have pride. Naruto responded to her weak grasp with a much stronger version of his own. As he squeezed her throat and dully noted her fear, he found himself disappointed. Maybe he was becoming accustomed to Hinata's terror too much. What good is pride if you're dead? He returned. Listen up, woman, I'm looking for someone. A missing ninja named Zabuza. I doubt you'd know anything about him, so is there anything here in this godforsaken country he might want? Tsunami struggled against the iron grip of the intimidating youth. Her voice choked when her wounded son attempted in vain to free her. Ina, Ri? Her plea was cut short as the blonde tightened his fingers again. I'm in no mood for games today. Answer the question. She eyed him with tearing eyelids and panicked as she tried to think of any possible reason this Zabuza would be in the country. Of course, she knew of one man whose work was of utmost importance. MIFA, there. The Uzumaki loosened his grip but did not release her. Who's your father? Tsunami coughed against the constricted influx of air. Tatazuna, where can I find him? He should be using the main roads that lead straight to the town square. Naruto leaned in, squinted, and released the woman. It was a satisfactory enough answer, so he decided to be benevolent today and let the mother and her son live. Without another word, he turned back the way he came and started for the port he saw when he landed on the beachhead. There's no other way into this country, he'd probably arrive there. He eyed the clearing around him. The path was rather large, so he figured this must have been the main road. After a little walking, the port he noticed on his way in came into sight. The blonde's hateful eyes narrowed when he saw a handful of figures approaching, only to find that the view was becoming obscured by mist. Where'd this come from? He wondered, knowing that mist of this thickness usually accompanied cold mornings and evenings, not midday. His eyes shot open when he could no longer see the 5 individuals but could hear a girl's shriek. That's it. He knew, this mist must be a technique. Given his immortal state, he charged headlong into the cold airborne spray with his unusual weapon drawn and prepared to strike. He could make out a figure in the fog and headed straight for it, reeling back with a smile born of excitement. Only for his lips to contort in a sneer when he found a familiar face. Said familiar face whipped around and stared at him in shock. Naruto? He glared at her. What are you doing here? Hunting. He relaxed a tad. You see a missing ninja around? She was so jarred by her situation that it took everything for her to aim a shaky finger to her right. He's fighting Asuma. The Uzumaki eyed her a second longer before running off into the mist, oblivious to her trailing stare. He heard something whiz over his head and ducked. Immortal? Yes. Invulnerable? No. Can't let him take my head off. Now he could hear the sounds of battle, the intoxicating clang steel on steel. He ran towards the noise and was rewarded with 2 silhouettes hammering away at each other. One wielded a massive sword that didn't look familiar, so the murderous blonde smiled as he aimed the spiked end of his javelin at him. With a final burst of speed, he leapt at the figure and came into view. 2 pairs of eyes glanced at him in surprise. Zabuza saw that the kid's weapon was aimed at him, so he took the initiative and ducked. Asuma, however, wasn't so astute. He was committed to his attack. His trench knife continued forward and went right through the blonde's arm as the boy overshot his target. Damn it, the immortal cursed at the Sarutobi, that stings. Naruto. The man spouted, why are you here? I'm after him. He aimed a finger at the retreating shinobi. He turned his bloody grin at the man and addressed him when he stopped. You're Zabuza, right? Said missing ninja stared at him, wondering why such a young boy was unfazed by the gaping wound in his arm. That'd be me, kid. Who the hell are you? You with the hunter ninjas? The immortal's disturbing smile never faded as he tugged at the headband around his neck. I'm just the guy sent to kill you. Now let's go. The Momochi obliged by preparing his sword for a downward strike. He saw how the boys smiled and it reminded him of the Suigetsu brat. Both boys seemed to enjoy battle, this one more so than the other if the length of his smile was anything to go by. Naruto dodged the swing at the last second and sprang forward, his spiked instrument angled at his quarry. It didn't connect, though Zabuza planted a foot right in his face. The blonde flew back and recovered poorly. This was the most fun he'd ever had. Up until now I've been fighting civilians and guys who couldn't hurt me no matter how hard they tried. This one is different. He ran forward again for the same attack. Something about the definition of insanity rang in his mind, but he was having too much fun to really listen to it. Naruto. Asuma's voice interrupted his assault as the target melted into the mist. What are you doing? You'll get killed like this. When the missing shinobi disappeared from view, the boy snarled at the older ninja. I won't die, he spat. Why are you here, anyway? Protecting Tazuna. Ah, he spoke up at the familiar name, so that's what he wanted. Asuma didn't understand the boy's words. What? You guys get going. The blonde waved the Jonin away with his javelin. I'll take care of this guy. But, he glared at him. It's my mission, straight from old man Hokage. Argue with him. Now leave. This kill is mine. The Sarutobi's eyes narrowed at the bloodthirsty boy and he promptly departed from the scene in search of his scattered team. He knew deep down that the boy was right, it was their mission to protect Tazuna, not defeat the bridge builders would-be assassins. Now that someone had come along to do that job, they could do theirs. Naruto could hear the Konoha team scuffling about in the foggy background as their voices became gradually distant. Hey Zabuza, he called into the mist. You get hired by Gato to kill Tazuna? When no reply came, he continued. Gato's already dead, so you're not getting paid for this. Unfortunate, a deep voice muttered behind him. The blonde spun in place to stab the intruder but failed, unlike the Momochi. The massive blade connected with the boy's midsection in a wide swipe and the Uzumaki's torso went flying. Tense seconds passed and the boy's upper half slammed into the ground several meters from his lower half, and everything was over. Zabuza straightened and eyed the corpse. Did he really kill Gato? Despite his status, he was an efficient man. If there was no point to a job, then there simply wasn't a point. Money was the deciding factor as of the moment, not pride or honor. Deciding that his backup would be a good source of information, he addressed the misty environment. Haku, you there? A masked youth appeared next to the looming swordsman in an instant. Yes, Lord Zabuza, I want you to find out if this kid really killed Gato. I'm gonna keep an eye on Tazuna until then. No point in killing the old man if there's no profit. Haku nodded slowly. Yes, Lord Zabuza. Before preparing to leave though, he glanced at the fresh corpse before him. He felt a twinge of guilt at the death of someone his age, even if it was by his master's hand. He would make it a point to honor the boy's death at another time, and he turned to leave opposite his benefactor when both stopped cold in their tracks. God damn it, a shrill voice shouted. Two pairs of shocked eyes looked at each other and then at the torso lying several meters away. The disembodied half's arms flailed and, once gaining a foothold with the javelin, righted itself. That fucking hurt. For once in his life, Zabuza was speechless. He blinked a few times to make sure it wasn't an illusion. Nope, still half a man talking to him like nothing was wrong. Haku wasn't much better off. Why you are alive? The ice user stuttered. He had never seen anything like this. So there's two of you, the blonde grunted as he held himself steadfast. Well, ain't that just great? I'm not even getting paid for one. What the hell? The Momochi finally spoke. What are you? Naruto sneered at him. I'm immortal. But, how? Haku added. Lord Jashin, came the simple reply. And once I get back together, I'm sending both of you to meet him. The former mist swordsman gathered himself and strolled up to the disembodied half. As if, kid, he raised his hefty weapon into the air. Save me a spot? Lord Zabuza. The masked ninja's effeminate cry interrupted the towering shinobi. What? The man was obviously annoyed. He spun on his heel, momentarily striking the blonde from his sight. Ow! The Uzumaki had taken advantage of his quarry's split-second distraction and jabbed his javelin at the man, barely pricking his big toe. Pathetic, he complained about the wound's lack of severity, but it'll do. Zabuza instantly redirected his attention to the immortal and chucked his massive blade into him. This time, the sword didn't cleave all the way. It got stuck in the sternum, effectively rendering the Jashin follower a human shish kebab. Now, he hefted the weapon over his shoulder, taking the noisy boy with it. What is it? Haku? The rogue ninja never thought the day would come when he would bear witness to something that could render him speechless. It was surprising enough that he currently faced a mostly defeated opponent who couldn't die, but what stood before him now was simply too much. What the hell? Naruto's eyes also widened in shock, although he was the first to recover from it. After all, one who could be hoisted into the air via impalement and still talk like nothing was wrong couldn't be dumbstruck for long. His face contorted into noticeable displeasure. Who the hell are you? Before the trio stood the blonde immortal's legs, plus some. Everything above the crimson belt had been shorn off by Zabuza and somehow replaced. Now, instead of the murderous Uzumaki's torso in place over his legs, there was a similarly proportioned body of a girl roughly his age with fiery red hair. In short, Naruto's lower half grew a replacement, and she looked equally as happy to see the immortal as he was to see her. Huh, she had a gruff voice as she swiveled her shoulder, never thought I'd finally see the day. Guess I gotta thank that Hyuga. Why is there a girl growing out of me? Naruto shouted from his raised position, aiming his javelin at her in accusation. And why is she flat as a pancake? This irked her. Don't call me that again, brat. What, a flat-chested bitch? A human, damn it. She stomped the ground. Just because I'm stuck in this body doesn't make me any less of a demon. The blonde crossed his arms across his penetrated chest. Demon, so you're the fox? Always thought you were a guy. She placed her arms at his hips in a huff, oblivious or uncaring to the fact that her short crimson hair did nothing to hide her naked torso. Demons transcend gender, dumbass. I'm just using the other half of your filthy genes to project myself. He sneered at her. Whatever. Get over here and reattach me so I can kill this guy. Patting Zabuza's sword with his free hand, he broke said ninja from his stupor. The Momochi reeled back with his oversized weapon. Bunch of freaks. With that, he lobbed Naruto at the female counterpart and rushed both of them. The immortal aimed his javelin at his oncoming legs in midair in the hopes of pinning them down. The fox stuck her tongue out at him and sidestepped, leaving the blonde free to sail into the tree behind her. She eyed him with a smirk. His antics were humorous before glancing at the advancing swordsman. So pathetic, she thought as Zabuza's enormous sword flew at her in slow motion. She blocked it with nothing more than a raised forearm. The rogue ninja instantly followed up on his attack by releasing the sword and planting a solid kick into the girl's gut. But it felt like kicking steel, it did nothing. At that moment, his senses ordered him to retreat, but his foot was captured in the iron grip of the fox. A moment later, his face greeted the cold ground and the wind got knocked out of him as the girl spun him straight into the earth with minimal effort. Shit, she's strong. Lord Zabuza. Haku cried as he lobbed handfuls of needles at his master's attacker in the hopes of buying time. The fox whipped her arm around the older ninja's oversized knife and spared a glance at the masked boy assaulting her. With a bemused grimace, she swung the thing at the boy and hit him hard with the broad side of the sharpened steel slat. I could get used to this. Now that the boy was out of the way, she turned her eyes at the Momochi and raised the stolen weapon into the air. Her lips split into a sick smile previously owned by her jailer and she stated, "Decapitated by your own sword." How embarrassing. But before she could deliver the death blow, a sudden tug jolted her from her attack. Her head spun around to find Naruto climbing up his legs. "Get off me, brat." She spat as she swung her arm at his face. But the blow never connected. Rather, her arm became translucent upon contact, melted into the boy's flesh, and shot towards his arm. Shit, she swore inwardly, he's absorbing me. The Uzumaki realized this as well, and that only served to spurn him on as he literally climbed back into position amidst the fox's desperate cursing and flailing. When both halves finally touched, he twisted in place a few times and felt the fox's body holding him in place, that is, until his wounds eventually healed. Oh, this could be useful. Zabuza scrambled to his feet, retrieved his weapon, and retreated into the mist. His lungs ached as they begged for air, and he needed another plan in order to avoid that disaster all over again. Better yet, he thought, maybe I should just get out of here. Nodding to himself, he called out to his subordinate. Said masked shinobi stirred, he had been knocked unconscious by the blow, and he could feel several broken ribs. The first thing to come to mind was, of course, his master. But before he could open his mouth, he heard Zabuza's voice calling him. Haku, we're leaving. Yes, Lord Zabuza. The boy crouched to leap into the tree line and shot a final glance toward their blonde assailant. His eyes narrowed in concern when he saw yet another new predicament. The immortal licking the end of his javelin while scribbling a pattern on the dirt with his blood. What is he doing? Haku gasped when the blonde's body suddenly transformed into something that resembled a voodoo doll, and he was only concerned further when Naruto jammed his weapon into his own heart. It was then that all his fears came true as he heard Zabuza yelp in the distance. Lord Zabuza. He rushed towards his master's labored breathing, although the mist was now clearing due to its owner's state. The ice user landed next to his benefactor and removed his mask, eyes wide and salty with tears. Lord Zabuza, what's wrong? The Momochi eyed the boy and coughed up more blood. That was all he could do. He felt immeasurable pain surging through his chest, almost like he'd been stabbed in the heart. That feeling penetrated him several more times and his body lurched forward with every tortuous jab. Seconds later, Zabuza Momochi was released from the mortal plane and went limp in a puddle of his own blood. Haku simply stared at the fresh corpse. His eyes watered, but he couldn't weep for the passing of the man who had saved him. It didn't seem real to him, almost like a bad dream from which he couldn't awake. It also felt distant, like he was watching this scene from the eyes of an unsympathetic sparrow in the treetops. Even the approach of a presence from behind didn't shake him from his paralyzing sorrow. "What's up?" Naruto asked nonchalantly. "You just gonna let me kill you?" The ice user said nothing for a moment. "You may as well. You're easy. Got a reason?" He slowly shook his head. "No, there is no reason in life. Not anymore." The Uzumaki frowned at this logic. "You're still alive. Ain't that enough?" Haku finally turned to the blonde behind him but didn't rise from his knees. "I was Lord Zabuza's instrument. If I cannot serve that purpose, then I have no reason to continue living." The immortal snarled at him. "There is no purpose in life. As long as you're alive, that's all that counts." The effeminate boy stared at him blankly. "What do you mean? Life doesn't have a purpose. You live, you die. That's it." "Well, for me it's different, but the only thing I have to do is kill for Lord Jashin." Haku thought this belief was no different. "Is that not your purpose then? To kill for Jashin?" The blonde laughed at the clearing sky. "All I have to do is honor my god with blood. Everything else is up to me." A moment of silence passed. "That may work for you, but it does not for me. The person I hold dear is dead, thus I have no reason to go on living." Naruto had had enough by now. He grabbed Haku by the hair and pulled him to his feet. "You want a reason to live?" he stated angrily. "I'll give ya one. Follow me." This struck the ice user as odd. Was this immortal attempting to replace Zabuza? "I'm sorry?" The blonde strolled over to the Momochi's corpse without looking at the distraught boy. "You said you were his instrument." He raised the bladed end of his javelin over the body's neck. Weapons can change hands. With that, he brought the impromptu sword down on the dead man's neck, almost severing it. He hacked at it a few more times and finally succeeded. Haku swallowed in horror upon seeing his former master's corpse desecrated without a shroud of hesitation. "You would give me another purpose?" It pained him to speak these words. He and the mist swordsman had grown close over the years, but the sorrow and doubt in his heart was enough to make him consider the offer. The Jashin follower shrugged as he picked up the severed head by the hair. "Yeah, sure, if you want to call it that." With that, he began walking away as if on the way home from the store, the S-class shinobi's head swinging from his fist like a grotesque watermelon. The ice user gulped down his sadness. This was it. "Why your wish is my command, Lord?" "No," he held out a finger before his twisted grin formed. "You said so yourself, you're a weapon. You call me master from now on." Haku bowed his head with great trepidation. How would this new master fare? "Yes, master?" As the days passed, so did emotions within Konoha. Ever since Naruto had disappeared, the mass slaughters seemed to drop off. Gruesome murders were no longer being discovered on a daily basis, and this led the vast majority of the villagers' content that the demon was gone. Many believed that the blonde killer was gone for good, exiled or eliminated after the untimely destruction of the Hyuga clan. But one such Hyuga knew better. Hinata had spent these days as quiet as ever. She heard almost nothing but slander against her murderous crush, and she instinctively knew that speaking up in his defense would only bode ill for her. She knew that the villagers would see her as corrupted and toss her away with the remainder of her surviving family in the loony bin. "I still have to protect Hanabi," she consoled herself over her inaction. She had stayed with Anko these past few days, and she could honestly say at this point that the Mitarashi was competition on some level. It seemed the only common ground they had was the blonde murderer, and the sweets lover didn't have her self-esteem issues. Rather, the snake charmer had an abundance of confidence, and Hinata saw that ability to act on even the smallest affection as an affront to her. But the shy girl also knew that there was little she could do about it. She was simply too withdrawn, and she knew she couldn't just up and change her personality overnight. If only I wasn't so bland, she cursed her drab looks, it would be easier for Naruto to look at me. Little did she know that her pale skin already put her ahead of the curve. The blue-haired girl had also encountered something she had never imagined. Ever since the slaughter of her family, she was elevated to the sole heiress of its fortunes. The elderly Hokage had gently informed her that, in due time, she would come into possession of the sum of her bygone family's belongings. This led to the unusual situation of opportunists. She literally hid in the shadows almost full-time now. News of her eventual riches had spread and she was practically assaulted by every young male in Konoha. Thank God they haven't found out where I live, she thought. I would never have a moment's peace. A tiny part of her wanted to scream and shout at each and every boy that approached her. It was obvious what they wanted. Their attempts to gain her hand and, by proxy, her inheritance were insultingly obvious. But her upbringing held her in check. It was ingrained in her to never act out under any circumstances. She simply stewed in silence, although her quiet demeanor did nothing to deter any of the would-be suitors. Why can't I stand up for myself? Am I just going to keep relying on Naruto? A sneeze echoed down the street from her position and she cracked a humble smile at that old superstition. But when a familiar voice swore rather profusely afterwards, she froze in place. It couldn't be. She maneuvered through the alley and peered into the street. Sure enough, there was her blonde crush. Her eyes softened when she saw him but hardened once again when she saw yet another rather attractive individual following closely behind. Is that another girl? But the Hyuga couldn't hear the duo as she trailed them from the shadows. The Uzumaki openly flipped off and cursed everyone who spared him an angry glance while Haku nervously attempted to appease the blonde. Master, the effeminate boy pleaded, perhaps it would be best if you didn't anger everyone. Ah, fuck them. He sneered at some woman who glared daggers at him. That's right, assholes. I'm back. A shopkeeper spoke up. Go back to your exile, murderer. Naruto cracked his bloody smile at the offender, waltzed over to his stand, and reeled back his arm to break the man's nose. He stopped when Haku nabbed his arm at the last possible second. Master, the demure ice user begged once more, please stop. The blonde immortal shook his arm free and eyed his new subordinate dangerously. Don't touch me, he commanded, ever. He bowed in acknowledgement before backing away to give his new lord some space. When the blonde continued on his way, Haku obediently followed him as he was lost in his own thoughts. He is not a terrible person, he observed. Something has happened to him in the past to make him lose faith in people. He reflected on that musing. He had been much the same way in his youth. When he was abandoned, he felt absolutely worthless, a waste of air. He wouldn't admit it, but he felt a twinge of animosity towards the world that left him to die simply because of his special blood. But then Lord Zabuza came along. He smiled at the memory. Things changed for the better after that encounter. Maybe that was all his new master needed? Someone to accept him without exception. Damn it, said Immortal's voice broke Haku from his thoughts. Where the hell is she? The effeminate bloodline user cocked his head. Who are you looking for, master? He was under the impression that the immortal would head home after dropping off Zabuza's head at the Hokage Tower. For once, the blonde looked directly at the boy. A bitch named Asha. Can't miss her turquoise hair, dresses like a hooker. Haku blushed at his master's words. He was still as innocent as they come. Does this, Asha, stay in any one place? Naruto shrugged. Nah, she jumps around. I thought she'd be in the red light district, but it looks like she's moved on. Haku blushed again. He had no idea the Jashin follower could be so nonchalant about walking into so many brothels. Screw it, the Uzumaki suddenly halted mid-stride. I'm going home. I'll find her later. Yes, master? And so the duo traversed the village with a Hyuga in tow, walking down the winding streets until they came upon a housing complex. Haku figured that his master lived here, but why did the boy stop at a door he was so obviously aiming for? What's that sound? He wondered, the blood running to his cheeks when he realized they were the sounds of a woman having fun. Naruto looked none too happy. Oh, you can't be serious. He kicked his door in, barged into his bedroom, and sneered at the sight. For the love of Jashin. On my bed? Asha glanced at the newcomer with her perverse smile, not even having the common decency to remove her hand from between her legs. Naruto, she shivered in ecstasy, you're back quick. Get the fuck off my bed. She giggled and obeyed, but that didn't lower the volume in Naruto's voice. Oh, fucking gross. The sheets are wet. The fellow immortal chuckled with a smile and wrapped her previously busy arm around the blonde's shoulder. Sorry about that. So, she brought her lips to his ear. You ready to make do on our deal? He resisted the urge to spit in her face. Yeah, this way. As he led the female murderer out of his bedroom, he inquired, You keep Deadman away from Hinata like I asked. I haven't even seen Deadman since you left. He eyed her intrepidly. You're kidding. Did he skip town? She shrugged. Looks that way. Then why did you stick around? Her lips cracked into a luscious grin. Because you still owe me. He muttered, after all that work, there wasn't even a reason. When they approached the outer door, he aimed a palm at a thoroughly confused Haku. Asha, Haku, Haku, Asha. The female immortal's carnal instincts immediately took over and she moved behind the boy, wrapping her arms around him and slowly digging her hands into his clothes. Oh, she's so cute. Master? The ice user's face resembled a tomato. Ash's hands were gradually making their way to embarrassing places. Haku, the blonde addressed the blushing boy, keep Asha company as long as she wants you. Don't worry, he chuckled, it looks like she likes you, so you don't have to worry about dying anytime soon. He gulped. Dying? Ooh, Naruto. Asha cooed as her hand slid towards the boy's center, she's such a cute girl. As if on cue, her hand found something unexpected and her eyes widened in surprise. Quick as the wind, she pulled Haku's pants forward and glanced into them before returning her wide-eyed gaze to the Uzumaki. Oh my god! She exclaimed with a hysterical smile, you brought a shemale. Squealing like a 4-year-old girl, she released Haku, embraced Naruto, and planted the roughest kiss she could conjure on his lips. Both were either too ecstatic or confused to notice a nearby gasp. While Hinata didn't have a clear view of the scene, she did see Asha suddenly hug her crush and kiss him. Her hands instantly covered her mouth when she squeaked, but otherwise her brain froze. Was Asha even more competition for Naruto's attention? When the blonde was freed, he didn't know what to think. He stood there with a blank expression while Asha nabbed a shaky Haku and dove back into his apartment. Seconds passed, and the young immortal finally shook his head to clear it. Hey, get out of my house. When no coherent reply came, he repeated the order. I mean it, Asha. Get out of my... An excited moan emanated from his bedroom. Oh, forget it. Defeated, he shut his door against the cries of both aggressor and victim alike and started back the way he came, grumbling something about horny bitches and addiction. That was when he ran into the Hyuga, who appeared to be frozen in place. Hinata? What are you doing here? It took her a full second to respond. Naruto. What just happened here? He glanced back and sneered at the increasing volume. Asha just took over my apartment. Damn bitch. The shy girl's eyes trailed to the ground. Did that kiss not mean anything, or is he avoiding my question? The blonde looked back at her and noticed her downcast gaze. You find Anko like I told you to? Why yes. She yelped, unsure of what her crush felt about being kissed by an attractive woman. You stay with her? Yes, she nodded in resignation. You have a place in mind now? Do I? What? Were you waiting for me to get back before finding another place to stay? She could hear the irritation in his tone, although she knew that he was actually being exceedingly patient with her. And not really. In truth, she was actually thankful that her current living situation included someone else, even if they were competition. It helped keep her mind off of things. So you're still staying with Anko? Yes? Alright, he nodded in satisfaction. Looks like I've got a place to stay, too. With that, he started walking off. Hinata's eyes almost fell out of her head. He's going to stay in the same house as me? Under normal circumstances, this would have been a dream come true. In fact, she wondered if it still wasn't. She started after the blonde and stumbled over her feet as she did so. Naruto glanced back and stopped. He had been so pissed off over Asha invading his home that it hadn't fully hit him that the ultimate source of pleasure now stood behind him. His trademark grin found its way onto his mouth and he reached out to touch the Hyuga's pale face. Said girl gasped at his touch and instinctively recoiled. Seeing the blonde's smile widen at her retreat, she composed herself as best she could and winced as he cradled her face with hands caked in dry blood. Come on, he whispered when he was close to her face, where's that fear from before? You can't tell me it's completely gone. She forced a weak smile and trembled under his light touch. I am not afraid. His grin died a little. Really? Then why should I keep you around? She gaped like a fish before finding her voice. Because I want to be here, for you. Her voice was so tiny at the end that she wondered if he'd even heard her. He did, but he had found a smidgen of blood that hadn't yet hardened on his palm that attracted his attention. With careful precision, he worked the drop of ooze onto his finger, then ran it across her lips. It painted them a fantastic crimson that contrasted her pale features with amazing clarity, and he found that he had to get a closer look. Hinata's face reddened to match her lips when the Uzumaki kept nearing her, and the taste of copper on her lips was no longer palpable as the blonde came uncomfortably close. Is he? Naruto recalled the fresh memory of Ash's affection, and briefly wondered how he'd react to it a second time. Curiosity notwithstanding, he closed the gap between their lips and almost kissed the Hyuga. The only thing that kept him from going through with it was the sudden limpness of her body. What am I doing? He wondered sullenly. This was not something Jashin's devout could experience. Our lives are meant for killing, not pleasure. Especially not with someone. He gazed at the unconscious girl in his arms and holstered her over his shoulders before carrying her away with a growing smirk. But she does look beautiful with a little blood.
That's all for now. If you enjoy this video, then please like, share and do comments.